Good evening. Welcome, please. Welcome to the November 13th, 2024 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. I am Mark Pasquesi, acting chairman of the commission. At this time, I would like to ask members of the commission to introduce themselves, starting at my far left.
My name is Paul Thomas.
Lisa Nearing.
Louis Pickus.
Jamie Moorhead.
Barrett Davey.
And from city staff, we have Miss Michelle, Kathy Cerniak and Louis Prada. Thank you. All right, our first item of business, actually before we get into that, I am going to, consideration of minutes from previous meeting, we're postponing that. Okay, very good. And due to the significant interest in this first item on the agenda, the commission will not be hearing a presentation on the draft Bank Lane Streetscape Enhancement Plan this evening. The Bank Lane presentation will be heard at the December 11th Plan Commission meeting to assure that there is ample opportunity to discuss and hear public comment on the draft Streetscape Plan. Is my mic going in and out?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Let them know.
All right. I'm going to proceed then. Everybody can, okay. The first item on the agenda, the only item on tonight's agenda, is the consideration of an amendment to section 159.154, Personal Wireless Service Facilities Overlay District of the City Code to designate a site or sites for telecommunications facilities such as cell towers, monopoles, and antennas in the vicinity of Waukegan and Everett roads for the purpose of improving wireless service in the Waukegan Business District and more broadly in the fourth Ward. It'll be presented by city staff. At this time, I will ask for a declaration of conflicts of interest and ex parte contacts by the commission.
Nope, no conflict.
All right. Hearing none, I will, at this time, swear in anybody who intends to testify tonight. So I have the names of everyone who intends to testify. So if those people will please stand up and raise your right hand so I can swear you in. Okay. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you are about to give or have previously given is true and correct to your best knowledge? Yes. Very good. Okay, at this time we will have presentation by the petitioner. Oh, you moved on me. There you go. Please proceed.
Thank you, Acting Chairman Pasquesi, members of the Commission. As you can tell, anytime we talk about telecommunication infrastructure, it is a topic of much interest. It always has been every time we look to this ordinance, and it's one of those issues that everybody wants, everybody needs, but it's difficult to talk about how we're going to provide that service. Sure. I'm going to provide a high-level overview first. I'm then going to summarize the existing overlay districts, the wireless personal service wireless districts, and the existing telecommunication infrastructure. I'm going to review the alternatives in this area that have been considered. I'm going to describe the amendments as currently proposed, and then review the options before the commission. This is a city-initiated amendment. As the city often does, the city tries to be proactive and make plans for how development will occur, how projects will be reviewed, in this case, where telecommunication infrastructure will be or should be or could be built out. The City Council, a couple meetings ago, gave direction to the Plan Commission to consider an amendment to our existing code. That's why we're here tonight. The city could wait and simply be reactive to a petition that's filed by a telecommunication provider or a tower builder company. Why now? For several years, we have heard from telecommunication companies of their interest of having infrastructure in this part of the community, really focused on the Everett and Waukegan Road intersection. We have pushed back and we have said, look at what other options exist. Look at the opportunity to co-locate antennas on existing buildings in that area. St. Patrick's Church has been looked at, the fire station has been looked at, the other taller buildings, Private Bank, which is now CBIC Bank, Forest Square, that clock tower, and in every case, at least up till now, those locations have not provided enough benefit to companies to be willing to come in, or enough improvement in service for them to be willing to invest in those types of improvements. More recently, over the last 12 months, we are increasingly hearing from businesses along Waukegan Road in the Waukegan Road Settler Square Business District, from residents in the area, from schools in the area, both our public school districts and St. Mary's, from our public safety staff, that they do not have adequate service, that calls are being dropped, or that their apps don't work on their phone. Why is this? All of us have more devices now. We're doing more on our phones. So it's really a two-pronged issue. It's the quality of service as well as the capacity. There simply isn't enough infrastructure to serve that area. And as a result, service in other areas of the community is suffering because existing infrastructure, existing towers, antennas are being offloaded, service is being pulled from those to try and serve this area. So as a result, the lack of infrastructure in the southwest quadrant of the city is not just impacting that area, but also impacting the rest of the city. The city's role in wireless service. Wireless service is an essential public service. It simply is today. Everyone needs it and everyone uses it. The city is not a provider of wireless service, just like the city is not a provider of electricity. But what the city can do is be proactive in identifying how that service can be provided to the community in a way that meets the community's needs. There are various essential services and infrastructure throughout the community, in all parts of the community. From the water treatment plant off of Lake Road, when that was being expanded, there's antennas on top of that building, there's HVAC units. That's immediately behind homes that are on Lake Road and in the views as those homes from some areas look to the lake. When the compost center began to be used as a compost center, that is, although that's not an essential city service, the water tower is, but the compost center was controversial. We often hear from residents that they would like electrical lines and other utility lines undergrounded. In new subdivisions, they are undergrounded, but in many of the older parts of the community, the east side, there are overhead wires and utility poles. We regularly get complaints about those. Even in our central business district, as we talk about Bank Lane, one of the priority items for enhancing Bank Lane is to underground the utilities. Other public infrastructure, we have roads. Some of our streets, Waukegan Road and Route 60, are IDOT roads, and they generate noise and they generate dust, and there's high-speed traffic. We have multiple rail lines going through the community. So the entire community, different parts of the community, are impacted by services that we all as a community need and want. The current code provisions were first approved in 1997, were amended in 98, in 99, and again in 2018. Those code provisions were put in place, again, to allow the city to proactively look at the community and say, these are locations where towers will be permitted. In a moment, I'll review a map, but the southwest quadrant of the city, you will notice, is essentially a telecommunications infrastructure desert. That is a lower density part of our community. The lots are larger in that area, and 20 years ago, there were there were not as many businesses along Waukegan Road. Today we have medical offices, we have several banks, we have restaurants, and again, over 20 years, all of those businesses now more consistently have a demand for high quality and adequate wireless service. The code provisions speak to ground equipment. When you have a tower or an antenna, you either have ground equipment or you have equipment that needs to be placed on the roof or in a building. The code speaks to ground equipment. It limits the size of a building enclosure that can be at the base of a tower to 300 square feet. It limits the height to 12 feet. It requires screening of that ground equipment, either through landscaping or fencing. The city could require a masonry wall if desired. The code speaks to co-location on buildings and identifies specific areas, in fact, very close to this building. If you look out the conference room windows, you may not have noticed it before, but the 191 East Deer Path building has quite a bit of equipment on top. The 580 Bank Lane building, just outside of the city's historic building and on top of residential units, has a pretty extensive tower on top of that building. The code regulates how and where that can happen. Some of the current installations predated the code, so the code now provides more restrictions than were originally in place before the section of the code was in place. In 2018, the City Council amended the code to streamline the process for companies to install distributed antenna systems, or DAS. Smaller antennas that could be placed on light poles or utility poles, and the amendment purposely made that process simple and provided a way for the city to license our own infrastructure, our own light poles. But the DAS system does not work if there isn't a tower and significant antennas to support that. So a DAS system alone does not provide the coverage needed. Companies also need to be able to, for lack of a better term, get enough bang for their buck to be willing to invest in a community. So by providing these various opportunities for companies to come in, the city has tried to assure that appropriate services, an appropriate level of service is provided to our residents and businesses. Louis, can I have my water? Thank you. This is a map of the approved overlay districts. So currently in the code, all of the areas shown in red, and this is actually enlargement of the Central Business District, but all of the areas shown in red, Lake Forest Academy, the hospital, the east side of 41 that runs all the way along this area, very close to homes, Lake Forest College, Woodlands Academy, Lake Forest High School, and the buildings I mentioned in the Central Business District, which is enlarged here, 580 Bank Lane, 191 Deer Path, and St. Mary's Church and School. Those are all areas where currently a tower or co-location on a building is permitted as regulated by the code. The various districts allow tower heights in the range from 90 to 160 feet in height for the towers. If you look at that map with an overlay, importantly, in this southwest quadrant of the city, this star marks the intersection of Everett and Waukegan. There are no approved infrastructure sites. Again, why did that occur 20 years ago? Probably because that is the lowest density portion of our city. There are large lots, and the business district along Waukegan Road was not built out. So this area pulls on towers from the rest of the community, as well as from towers outside of Lake Forest, further west on Everett Road. But there are no approved locations in this area. And that is why the council, in response to continued concerns that have been raised about the lack of service, that's why the council asked the Plan Commission to consider this amendment. So that map was the approved location. This actually shows the locations where towers in red are built out and co-location in green exists. And I know you have this in your packet. There are also packets at the back of the room. And the providers and the heights of the tower are listed on this map. But again, you see numerous towers in various areas in all three quadrants of the city, northeast, northwest, and southeast. But you don't see a quadrant here, or you don't see infrastructure in this southwest quadrant. That's why this discussion is in front of you, in an effort to provide a service to residents, businesses, institutions, and public safety that is currently lacking. These are some images of existing towers in Lake Forest and antennas. Lake Forest College, St. Mary's, 580 Bank Lane, 191 East Deer Path, Woodlands Academy. This is viewed from Western Avenue. It also is visible from South Park, from June Terrace and the neighborhood there. I did not provide photos of the tower at Lake Forest Academy, the hospital, but these are just some samples of what is currently in our community. And again, this is older technology. What we are proposing is the opportunity to be proactive, identify locations, and identify ways in which there could be limitations placed on how this infrastructure could be built out, instead of reacting to a petition that may come forward. Various alternatives have been considered for this area. As I said, we've spent probably more than a year challenging companies to look at the opportunity to co-locate on existing buildings in this area. We've looked at various city properties, the fire station, the compost center, train station, a city-owned property at Everett Road at the tollway. The fire station certainly has land. That location is closer to homes than if a tower was located at the train station. At the compost center, we currently have two providers on the tower. One is on an array above the tower, one is right below the collar. The water tower is a critical piece of the city's infrastructure. It is necessary to provide ample and clean water to West Lake Forest. We have had a structural engineer look at the water tower. The water tower structurally is at capacity. In addition, to support the existing antennas on the tower, there are cables that run up the cylinder. I can tell you personally, because I've climbed that tower, that it is literally shoulder to shoulder in that tower, and some of our maintenance staff who need to get up into that tower to do maintenance have a very difficult time moving through that tower. In addition, the more antennas, the more penetrations we put on that tower, the more potential we have for compromising that tower. Because of what's on there now, we do need to more frequently paint the tower, and in fact, in the coming years, you will likely see all of that equipment be taken off the tower and the tower repainted. The train station, we'll talk about in a moment. It was suggested Everett, a city-owned parcel on the south side of Everett Road at the tollway. That property does not meet the need. What we're hearing is that the ideal location is within a quarter to a half mile of the Everett and Waukegan Road intersection. As I mentioned, there are towers just on the other side of the roundabout off of Everett Road on the south side in a field there. These towers would be too close. That's also a significant grade change on that property. There is an opportunity at the compost center that I will talk about in a moment. We've looked at the Sunset Corners property. and importantly, the city cannot require a private property owner to lease land to a telecommunication provider. They could do a separate deal on their own and then submit to us, and it would be before you with, and you would need to act within a limited time and consistent with the legal requirements. Sunset Corners property, it certainly is within a half mile or a quarter mile. That shopping center does at time have a full parking lot. In fact, some of the employees already park off-site. So would that be a good location to compromise some of that commercial space? St. Mary's Primary School, we've looked at that location. Again, very close to residential, closer than any of our other proposed sites, and on the primary school property. Someone raised the dog park, Lake County Forest Preserve's dog park. It is not within the targeted area. I did contact the Forest Preserve and had a discussion with them. They do not approve new development on their sites. If they acquire a site where there's an existing lease for a cell tower, they honor that, but they do not allow development on land that's to be preserved as open space. And same with Lake Forest Open Lands. We did contact them. Proposed amendments. Consideration of a tower location that would be permitted at the compost center in an area that is outside of the floodway. Most of the land owned by the city at the compost center is in the floodway and cannot be disturbed. Recommending a permitted location near both north and south, an option of north or south, adjacent to the Telegraph Road, West Lake Forest train station. From the last time you discussed it, it is closer to the depot building and further away from residents. And also to consider an overlay district that would acknowledge that if a company is interested and willing, co-location on an existing building in the Waukegan Road Business District would be proposed. So we are recommending your consideration of these three options. At the train station, we would also recommend that there be a limitation, a condition that a flagpole type monopole would need to be required. Could not have external arrays. The cylinders would need to be internal and stacked on top of each other. Unless the pole rises to the height of 200 feet, no lights are required. So importantly, this is the type of monopole, certainly not the preferred monopole. It's more expensive than the other a monopole with exterior arrays, but this is what's proposed. Earlier today, I did receive this image that has been circulated. This is not what is being proposed, and I think it's important to clarify. This is a lattice tower with external antenna arrays, and it's unfortunate that misinformation is being circulated, but I thought it was important to note that this is not an image that has been put out by the city or even suggested in any way, shape, or form by the city. Quickly, this is the water tower. Water tower is right here. This is the compost site, Route 60. As you see, most of this property is covered by the floodway. However, there is a location here along the south property line near the school district. We have had a conversation, and there is interest in on the part of the school district in this being a potential location. There is some interest from service providers. This does not compensate. This does not do what needs to happen at Everett and Waukegan Road. This is the West Lake Forest train station. The two recommended areas, about 150 feet long by about 30 feet wide, up against the railroad tracks on either side of the depot building, limited to one tower. And again, at this location, it would be a flagpole type. And then co-location on existing buildings to provide other options. The recommendation is that we identify an area of that business district for that opportunity to co-locate on a building. options for your action. You do need to forward a recommendation to the city council. You can recommend no change, no amendment. What that would mean is that one of two things. Service levels remain status quo. The companies may say, I can get more bang for my buck if I go to Niles, and it's higher density, and perhaps it's easier. So service could remain status quo. Or a petition could be submitted. A provider could go to a private company, private property owner, come in and submit a tower of their choosing, of their design, and the city would be in a reactive position. That petition would need to come before you, and you would need to act within a limited period of time and would need to act consistently with the legal requirements. Or you could forward a recommendation to the city council to approve one or more amendments as noted or as modified, which could identify locations and limitations. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cerniak. Are you going to stay up there? Would you like to go back to your?
I'm going to go back over
Okay.
there.
At this time, I will turn to the board for any questions from petitioner or staff, one and the same. I'll start with, to my right, Commissioner Davey.
I'll wait for Kathy to get back. Hey, so Kathy, lots of questions, probably some comments. I'm certainly gonna wanna listen to public comment as well before I go too deep, but just starting off with, how about now? Okay, lots of questions, lots of comments. I kind of want to listen to what the community has to say first before going too deep, but I do have just some clarifiers. First one's really broad, which is just talk to me a little more about what happens when somebody else, whether it's a carrier or a developer, comes to us down the road and says, hey, I want to put in a cell tower. And I guess I'll preemptively comment, and I know we have I'm assuming it's available to the public, but we have a memo from Ansel Glink, the law firm, on the environmental issues, because I know we got a lot of letters from folks about safety. And so I want to make sure we're really clear on record about what we're saying and not saying about that as an implication associated with decision-making here, principally because the city has been in litigation in the past for casual language used by boards and commissions. So I want to be sensitive to that and not cost the city more money because we're not being intentional on that issue in particular, especially given that it's being elevated potentially by folks who are maybe not sharing appropriate information about it. So can we go there?
Yes, I think I heard two questions.
You did.
Let me address the health and environmental question first. You do have a memo, which is in the public packet as well, from the city attorney. And importantly, it's not that health and environmental concerns have not been considered. They have been considered, but they have been considered at the federal level. And the FCC sets the limitations for RF emissions. The city cannot base any decision, whether it's location, height, proximity to schools, residences. The city is preempted from considering any health or environmental regulations. Any tower, any antenna that is installed must meet the FCC regulations. So that's one part of your question.
Thank you.
What happens if someone comes forward and submits a petition? Not unlike a subdivision, not unlike a planned development. A petition would come in, we would assure that it's complete, and we would present it to the Plan Commission for public hearing. We would notice everyone within the limited area, but you would be reacting to the petition in front of you, as opposed to now, you're at the front end of the process, essentially developing a plan, not unlike a plan you might, the comprehensive plan or the plan you'll be looking at later for Bank Lane. You have the opportunity to set expectations, to set limits, to establish parameters, and to take the lead. telecommunication companies and tower building companies would prefer to come in and do what we want them to do, even if it's a little more expensive. I have heard that repeatedly and directly, but if the lack of service in that area becomes important enough and worth the investment of a company, as opposed to them just saying, you don't want coverage, we'll go somewhere else, they can submit a petition and we would be required to process it within the time limits in the code. And we would want to be very careful in what the commission bases its decision on. To your point, Commissioner Davey, that we are adhering to our legal limitations in evaluating such a petition.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just want to do one follow-up question to the first answer you gave regarding us being precluded from considering health, safety, environmental implications. There was somewhere in this correspondence, I saw someone questioning the application of that legal opinion, that it might have been interpreted incorrectly or something to that effect. Has City Attorney had a chance to review that correspondence, and if so, does City Attorney stand by their original opinion and advice?
Yes, I'm actually looking at the specific response, and I might find it. I won't take the time to read it right now. Yes, I forwarded that email to the city attorney. The city attorney responded that even in amending the code, in identifying locations, the city should not be considering potential, perceived, real health or environmental issues in amending a code to address telecommunication infrastructure. So we did get a response, a legal response on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Follow-on question around this, just the notion of being proactive and thinking about setting expectations and limitations and the way that we have the opportunity to craft something here. So do we have the opportunity then to also go as deep as to, mandating the types of implements that are being constructed? So to use your example there, a flagpole, I don't know if you can put that up on the screen again. I'd love to look at it again. Can you do that?
Do you want to do that now? We'll do that.
Yeah. And I'd love to see that, and then I'd love to see the other one you showed.
In response to your question, yes, in amending the code, you can specify limitations, parameters, place conditions. It doesn't mean someone couldn't request a variance. I mean, we see that all the time, request a variance from minimum lot size or setbacks. But yes, you can put those types of limitations in the code. What you couldn't do is prohibit build out of service entirely.
Right. So we could, mandate something like that versus the next one.
Yeah, not that.
Versus that, not that.
But what you can't do is direct the technology. It is, you can't mandate a telecommunication company or a tower builder to use a specific technology. That is again, a business decision by those companies.
But the technologies are like DAS, for example, DAS, which you were talking about. Like that's a form of technology, for example, and that form of technology may not meet the needs that we have, as defined by the current dead zone in the southwest quadrant of the city.
Correct.
And that's
our
why
code-
co-location becomes difficult, because that type of technology could be used as part of co-location, but in this instance, we're saying that that's not a solution to this problem.
It's not a solution on its own.
Right.
A tower, some larger antennas are needed in this area to allow that kind of a system to be built out to enhance service more broadly. And again, the city council proactively amended the code to allow a very streamlined process for building out distributed antenna systems.
Got it. Okay, I'll stop for the moment.
Okay. Commissioner Moorhead?
Okay, thank you. My first question, is there a tower developer out there with a pending application, and that we're handling this now, and if we don't handle it now, they're going to apply? I mean, is that?
There are multiple tower builders that we have been contacted by who have expressed interest and willingness in investing in this community in a way that makes sense for them. We've also heard from telecommunication providers, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon, that they are interested if infrastructure is available. And we are working with those same companies in other locations to add antennas or build out systems in overlay districts that are already approved. So yes, there's interest. The city has not entered into any agreement. I will add that this discussion is not motivated at all by revenue. This will not be a major revenue generator for the city. That was not the council's impetus for putting this before you. The impetus was to provide a service that's needed by our community in an adequate capacity and quality.
I looked at the comprehensive plan, which I think was updated in like 2019 for Sellers Square, and there's nothing in that about this site, or I don't think there's anything in it about cell tower sites. Is what we're considering tonight in conflict with that?
You're correct. The comprehensive plan doesn't speak to cell tower sites. It doesn't duplicate the code. The overlay district in the code itself really provides that direction.
Okay. In relation to the sections in the code relating to minimizing adverse visual impact and effect, my question is about the view corridors. I asked this in the last meeting, but I'll ask it again. Do we have an idea of how far north on Waukegan, south on Waukegan, and west on Everett we'll be able to see this tower? Like, when will it come into the line of sight?
I don't have photo simulations of that. What we do know is the tower that's on the Woodlands Academy property. You can see if you're northbound on Sheridan Road. You can see it from Western Avenue, and you can see it from the Northmore neighborhood. So we would anticipate, again, that tower has the external antenna arrays. We didn't know enough to require something different, or perhaps it wasn't available at that time. But yes, if a tower is built, it will be seen no matter where it is. But are there ways we can minimize the visual clutter?
When you were presenting, you were talking, well, it sounded like you were talking about advantages to having this on city property, but in looking at the existing towers, I did a rough count. I think there's maybe 11 towers, and 8 of them are on private property. So, I mean, is it doable to have this on private property?
It certainly, there could be discussions going on right now with private property owners. But as you look at this area, there are limited private properties. We don't have a large hospital site. Lake Forest College is a large site. Woodlands Academy is a large site. Lake Forest Academy is a large site. So absolutely, the city doesn't control what discussions are going on and doesn't control when or if a petition is submitted. But the city can be proactive if an amendment was approved. Theoretically, the city could go out with an RFP and say, we have an approved location on a city-owned site. Here's what we want, a tower of this type, this tall, in this location, with a masonry wall around the base, or whatever we might want. But the city could be proactive in those discussions rather than reactive.
Side question on that, is there a minimum acreage that the property has to be to accommodate a site like this?
What's proposed on either side of the train station depot is about 150 by 30, which we understand to probably be sufficient, perhaps a little bit more land area than would be needed to accommodate at least 3 providers with their ground equipment.
Okay.
You also need access. There needs to be a way to get in to maintain the equipment.
Okay. Could we propose a maximum height for the tower? Say, you know, the Woodlands Tower, I think, is 110 feet, and if we wanted to say no tower in Westlake Forest should be higher than 110 feet. Can we do that?
You certainly could. I think you have to balance that with a flagpole-type tower with the canisters inside the tower does need to be higher because you're stacking those canisters. And if it's 110 feet and you only get one provider, are we then faced with the need for one or two more towers in the area? And if so, where do you put those? The current code language does set as a priority building towers that can accommodate multiple providers for the very purpose of limiting how many towers overall we will need in our community. So that's the trade-off with that.
Okay. And I have a question about the coverage maps that were provided in the packet. You may not be the person to ask, but it looks like the Verizon coverage map and the AT&T coverage map, the actual coverage is different in size with the new tower. And I guess my question is why would the coverage be different?
And I'm not the person to ask. That was submitted as part of public testimony. That's why it's in your packet. There may be someone here tonight that can speak to it,
All right.
but I cannot speak to that. But those are certainly questions. If we received an application, if there was a code amendment, there would be requirements. We would require coverage maps,
Okay.
affidavits from committed carriers, and other requirements that are already detailed in the code.
Okay. And then looking at the existing wireless overlay district map and then the existing wireless infrastructure maps, it looks like, I could be wrong, but it looks like in District A, the north end of District A, which is along 41, we have availability there for a tower, but there is no tower. Do you know why there's no tower there?
North on the east side of 41,
Yes.
there's a tower very close to that on the hospital site.
Okay.
I think
Just-
he's
just
not
talking
that far
about the
north.
southern area.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
southern-
Oh, the south,
southern
not the
zone
north.
A,
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, there's two A's. The southern A.
Kind of Old Elm up to just slightly north of Wesley.
There is a tower with multiple providers just south of the storage facility in that area along 41.
You're talking about south of Old Elm Road.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
south of Old Elm Road, just south of the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Down there.
lockup facility.
So at the north end of that, the north end of the south portion of A, do you know if we could put let me rephrase it. Do you know if a tower could be located there?
Yes,
Like, is it,
it's in the overlay district. The overlay district, that provides options and permitted areas. We can't mandate that a tower locate there, and certainly companies look first at the areas that are already approved.
Yeah.
They would prefer to go through a process where they're complying with what the municipality has already approved. So
So-
I have to assume that there's adequate coverage in that particular area.
okay. Okay. That's all I have for now.
Okay.
I'll wait. Thank you.
Commissioner Pickus?
Kathy, excuse me. Appreciate all the information that you provided, really detailed. I'm just curious, did we work with any kind of independent consultant to provide guidance on what we can and can't do, current technologies, future technologies, try to look ahead and try to figure out what's the best solution here?
We did that as we were drafting our code, and we certainly have conversations with providers, but no, we have not, for this purpose, we have not brought in an independent consultant.
Okay. Second question, co-locating within the West Lake Forest District, maybe on the Waukegan Road area, has there been any conversations with any of the building owners there about possibly doing that?
There have been conversations over the last couple of years with providers to really push them to move in that direction. I believe some of those providers may have had conversations with private property owners, but no, the city has not asked private property owners if they want to have equipment. My guess is that if they were approached and it could be done in an appropriate way, that's revenue. So I have to think that would be something that would be considered.
Okay, so potential option there. Last question. You know, I kind of see two things with this. You know, we've got an amendment to the code, and then we have a location. And I get kind of one doesn't probably work without the other, but I guess I'll ask that question. Could there be an amendment to the code to say we want another tower in this area, region of the city, but the location is to be determined? Would that be a potential option?
I'm not sure what that would get you, because at some point you'd have to have the discussion about where is the location. If we just covered the whole southwest quadrant and said we want a tower somewhere, I don't know that that advances the discussion or provides any direction to providers, or probably any comfort to residences. If someone with a large lot wanted to talk with the provider and put something up, you'd have to review that petition.
Okay. No other questions?
Thank you. Commissioner Naring?
Yeah, in terms of the proposed addition overlay District A5 that you have, and that is in the amendments, if we recommend these 3 different sites, can we direct to say to provider, this is the first site that we would like it to be built? Or do they get to take a look at these sites and say, okay, this is where we want it? I mean, can that be controlled where we say, hey, we would like this site where, and you said it wouldn't fully service everything, but it could actually help. I mean, it would help a bit, and then maybe by then, maybe the businesses might say, oh, okay, well, we'll put up antennas or something. I mean, I'm just trying to brainstorm.
If I'm understanding your suggestion correctly, there would be a requirement that a provider demonstrate that, for instance, a new tower at the compost center does not meet the needs, and only then, by providing that information, could they come in with a proposal to do something at some other location.
Right, rather than saying, okay, I see these locations, I want this one, without us maybe directing and channeling where it would be there. I just, food for thought.
I think there could be language. Obviously, the providers, again, they're a business, and they're going to pick the location that really is most effective in providing coverage and not overlapping with other areas. But I think there could be some language that says, if demonstrate that this doesn't work, demonstrate that the compost center doesn't work, and demonstrate that co-location on an existing building doesn't work, and only then would consideration be given to a new tower.
Because the technology is advancing. I mean, just food for thought.
And I will note that 20 years ago, when the code was written, we heard that in 5 years towers would be obsolete, and currently there is no technology that replaces cell towers. They are still being built, they're still being used. There's also sorts of other ideas out there. And importantly, the code currently requires that if the technology changes, if a tower is abandoned or no longer needed, the code does require that the provider must remove and restore the site. So that's the opportunity there to kind of hedge our bets. If technology changes, sooner rather than later, we have that protection.
Yeah, that's all I have for right now.
Thank you. Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. Kathy, I'd like to go back and explore alternatives in a little more depth. And let me use my own house as an example. I live in a different part of town, so I'm not in this region. But cell phone signal in my house is somewhere between bad and non-existent. And I added cell phone boosters and have a good Wi-Fi network, and between those two, it's workable. Do not the homeowners and businesses in this area have that same option?
Absolutely.
Please, no clapping, booing, or anything else like that. Please, be respectful.
Okay?
Certainly, there's always that option.
Taking that logic a little further, and I'm out over my skis here now because I'm not expert in this technology, but is there not a larger scale version of a cell phone booster that would work for a region larger than a home where you could boost the signal in a neighborhood?
What we know is that currently this area, because it is a gap in our system, is pulling from other towers. The city is not a wireless provider, so there's no system the city could build. If there was a technology out there that was efficient, effective, and cost-effective, I'm sure a company will come forward with that. But I can't speak to whether there's some alternative out there. What we're hearing is that in this area where there are no towers, that in order to make boosters work better, in order to make a distributed antenna system viable, that major piece of infrastructure is needed to provide that improved service and to improve service to other parts of the community that are currently being offloaded to struggling to serve this area.
Okay. I'll stop on the alternatives at this point, maybe come back to it later. But your response triggered one more question. Given the interrelated nature of the towers and how load in one area could pull from another, I wonder if we were looking at optimizing the city in total and optimizing cell phone signal in the city, and we thought about it across the whole city, because there's needs across the whole city. There's all kind of areas. This is not the only area that has struggles with cell phone service. So if we looked at optimizing the entire city rather than one quadrant, could that process lead us to a different conclusion about where towers are required and how we would place them? Are we sub-optimizing by only looking at one quadrant?
What I can tell you is that we have providers that are looking at, actually two providers are looking at co-locating on the high school to join the one provider that's there. We have a provider that's interested in the compost center site. The city doesn't build out the telecommunications infrastructure, so we have to rely on the companies who do build that out. And again, this is an area they've identified as a gap. I think if they could put, I don't know if you're suggesting one mighty tower somewhere in the center, and if that covers everything, I think we have to rely on the companies to tell us where the gap is and how that's best covered. So I can't answer your question if there's an overall technology that improves everything across the entire city. It's not something the city would build out or taxpayers would pay for.
No, I understand that. It's just the optimization process. I wonder if we would think about amending the code in a different way if we were addressing the whole city rather than just the southwest quadrant, because of the interrelated nature of how this all works.
Okay, thank you. We'll have time for more questions following public testimony. We go with that? Okay. So at this time, we are going to move on to public testimony. I have here everybody who intends to speak tonight. If you've come in late and would like to speak, fill out one of these sheets and bring them up front. I'd like to set some guidelines to make this as effective a meeting as we can have. First and foremost, please don't clap, please don't cheer, please don't boo. I had hoped that I could make it through the whole meeting without banging my gavel until adjournment, and I've already failed. So really, just be respectful. When you cheer, boo, or clap, there might be someone here who has a different opinion, and it just makes it difficult for them to stand up and say their opinion. So I urge you to be respectful. Everybody here who would like to speak will have the opportunity to speak. You will have one opportunity to speak up to 5 minutes. Couple notes, you don't have to speak the entire 5 minutes if you don't need to, okay? Use the 5 minutes, but At the 5-minute mark, when that buzzer goes off, I'll ask you to wrap up your comments. If you continue, I'll have to bang the gavel, and we'll move on. Also, you'll have one opportunity. We're not going to, everyone's going to get their time to speak, but there won't be any, I'm going to give my time to someone else, and someone else comes up here for 15 minutes. So just note that. Also, in this list of people who would like to speak tonight, I see many familiar names because we've received a bunch of correspondence from all of you, and we love that, and thank you. With that, every piece of correspondence that we've received up until, I believe, 3:27 this afternoon, which was 27 minutes past the deadline, we've received it, we've considered it, we've read it all. So we have that. If you want to speak and say exactly what you emailed us or wrote a letter about, there's no need to. Feel free to just come up and say, hey, I sent this email, or say I don't need to speak because I sent you that email and it says exactly what I'm about to say. So I'm just trying to be as efficient as possible when it comes to that. Also, if you have something to say and the person in front of you says the exact same thing, you don't have to come up and say it, or you can just stand up and say, I agree with Mrs. So-and-so, and go back down. We have a ton of people to get through, and at 5 minutes, get comfy, because it's going to be a while. And then, last but not least, I will call the name of the person to come up and speak, and then I'll also I'll read out the name of who's on deck, basically. So that person can situate themselves close to the podium, so when the speaker is done, they move on, I'll call out the next person, and we will try to get through this as best we can. We good with that? All right. We will start with Julia Flannery with Chris Hensley on deck. And when you come up, just state your name and your address, and then share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julia Flannery, 1094 Arcady Drive in Lake Forest. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on what I believe is one of the most pressing issues facing our community today. My name is Julia Saran Flannery, and I'm a lifelong resident of the west side of Lake Forest. I've been privileged to call this community my home for the past 32 years, and I'm now raising my own family here with my husband, Tom, and our 1-year-old son. Lake Forest is not just a place to live for me. It's where my heart is. It's where my family, both immediate and extended, has grown, and where both lifelong and new friendships have been forged. There's a unique sense of pride I feel when I drive through this town after being away, and a sense of safety that this community provides. It's a place of peace, stability, and connection, and we all know that these are the qualities that make Lake Forest truly special. This is why I stand before you deeply concerned and strongly opposed to the proposal to changing the zoning codes that would allow for the construction of a 150-foot cell tower just a quarter mile from my home. While I understand that decisions regarding the approval of this tower cannot be based on health concerns alone, I would be remiss if I didn't address the growing scientific and community concerns about the potential health impact of such a tower, especially when it's located so close to residential areas, schools, businesses, and parks. The Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, sets guidelines for radiation exposure, but emerging studies suggest that there are still significant unknowns about the long-term effects of exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields. Research continues to raise questions about the impact of this radiation on human health, especially for vulnerable populations like children, the elderly, and those with pre-existing health conditions. As a mother to a young child, I am particularly concerned about the potential risks of this tower could pose to my son, his 3 cousins who live across the street, and other children in our community who will be growing up in its shadow. We already know that children are more vulnerable to environmental exposures, and this is not a risk I'm willing to take with my child's health or the health of any child in Lake Forest. Beyond the potential health risks, this proposal threatens the very essence of what makes our community so special. The peaceful, family-oriented environment we cherish could be compromised by the construction of a large, unsightly industrial structure that will loom over our neighborhoods. The aesthetic and charm of Lake Forest are what separate us from other towns, so why are we willing to sacrifice values on behalf of improved cell service? There are other routes that can be explored, and I implore you to do so. Our backyards are not the answer. Lake Forest has always been a place where thoughtful planning and community well-being come first. We have a legacy of making decisions that protect the health, safety, and quality of life of our residents, all while keeping residents' opinions at the forefront of those decisions. I urge you to consider these factors and reject the code proposal that would allow for this cell tower. Thank you for your time, your effort, and for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Flannery. Chris Hensley with Jim opposite Nick on deck.
Before I begin, am I able to pull up the image that was shown previously by Ms. Traniak? I can work the keyboard if that helps.
Hold tight.
The monopole, that one.
Okay, introduce yourself and state your address.
My name is Chris Hensley. I live at 1390 West Everett Road. I've been a Lake Forest resident since 2005, and for the preceding 4 years was a student at Lake Forest College. So I've been here for quite a long time. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm here to express my opposition to the proposed amendment to section 159.154 Personal Wireless Overlay District A, portions of B1 that would permit construction of a 150-foot cell tower, as it does not align with several key provisions of the Lake Forest City Code, specifically those outlined in section 159.152 and section 159.153. First, according to section 159.152B1, one of the primary goals of the city policy is to minimize the total number of towers throughout the city. The proposed tower in this location represents an unnecessary increase in the number of standalone structures, especially when there may be other opportunities to co-locate on existing towers or buildings, as encouraged by section 159.152B2. The city's policy clearly seeks to reduce the proliferation of new single-use towers, yet this proposal goes against that directive. Furthermore, section 159.152B5 emphasizes the goal of enhancing service coverage while minimizing the need for new structures by promoting shared use and co-location. This proposed 150-foot tower does not appear to leverage the existing infrastructure that could help meet coverage needs. I urge the Commission to carefully consider whether this new tower is necessary, given the growing emphasis on co-locating antennas to minimize visual and environmental impact. Section 159.152C3 of the City Code emphasizes the importance of minimizing the adverse visual impacts of towers. A 150-foot tower in a parking lot would have significant and detrimental effect on the surrounding environment, especially near residential areas less than 500 feet away. The visual impact of the community should not be underestimated, as we must ask whether the design and siting of this tower can truly minimize such harm as the ordinance requires. Section 159.153C1 stresses that towers should be located to minimize adverse effects on residential property values and the surrounding neighborhood. Building a large cell tower in a parking lot, particularly if it's near or visible from residential properties, could negatively affect property values and the quality of life for nearby residents. We must be cautious in approving new structures that could have such lasting negative consequences for our neighborhood. The Plan Commission Packet 11.13.2024 that was released on Friday, November 8th, page 13, the proposed addition to Overlay District A, portion B1, as shown in attachment A6, which is in all of your packets. The highlighted areas in the city staff report contradict the simulation that are included on pages 55 to 57, provided by RACAP, and also the conceptual site plan provided by Vertical Bridge and Terra Consulting Group on pages 58 through 61. One inaccuracy is found on pages 55 through 57. The simulations, which are similar to those on the screen, they do not provide an accurate picture of what a 150-foot monopole tower would look like. The simulations are inaccurate as evidenced by the current height of the existing trees. As you can see in the image here, As of today, the trees are approximately 30 feet tall. The tower is set to be 150, can be up to 160. So imagine stacking the trees 5 times to get a good representation of how big that actually would be. So the other image that shows the lattice tower, the different variations in that tower are 20-foot sections. That is an accurate representation of what 150 feet would look like. So the proposed sites at the train station are surrounded by heavy commuter traffic. Data from IDOT shows that 16,400 vehicles a day travel on Route 43 between Route 60 and Everett Road. 52 daily commuter trains from Metra, and I believe 12 Amtrak trains travel through that area every day. So the tracks immediately adjacent, all that daily commuter traffic through Westlake Forest would siphon off the available network bandwidth. The tower may primarily benefit businesses and commuters using apps on their smartphones who are just passing through the area with little effect or little increase in network availability for the residents of the Fourth Ward. Think of it as a garden hose where it's strong at its source, but at the end, every single person using a cell phone is poking holes in that hose, siphoning off our network availability. So those who are in favor of the building of the tower, most of the FOIA requests revealed that most of those people live on Farm, Old Barn, closer to the Lincolnshire tower. They wouldn't be even receiving any sort of impact from a new tower.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Come on, please. Yeah, thanks. All right, Mr. Opsenick, you're up with Natalie Torcolese next.
Commissioners, my name is Jim Opsenick. I'm a 40-year resident of Lake Forest, past president of the Preservation Foundation, currently a board member and involved in the community. My main, by way of background, before moving to Portland, or moving to Lake Forest, I lived in Lake Oswego outside of Portland, where I was vice president and general manager of a 50,000 watt AM and 100,000 watt FM station. So I know a little bit about RF, and I also know that FM signals are line of sight, which is what we're dealing with here. My question is why, it's more a question, not an answer, why we cannot upgrade the existing towers that are there, or antenna that are on top of the water tower at the recycling center, okay? They've been there a while. I don't know what has been done in the way of upgrade. The other thing is this new proposed tower is slightly more than 1.5 miles away from the existing water tower antenna. Now, that doesn't make any sense. 1.5 miles and you have to have this. Recently talking with a good friend of mine who was president of one of the divisions of Ameritech, okay? And he's closely involved with cell business and everything else. And there is such a thing as directional cell tower activity. If that is the case, why would you not then, if you have to build a tower instead of upgrading the water tower antenna, put another one out at the recycling center, make it directional, and aim it right towards the quadrant you're talking about, rather than having this monopole as an eyesore by the train station. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Torcolese, you're up with Ray Bushman next.
Natalie Torcolese, 271 West Everett. I did send an email, so I'm just going to be brief about what I say. Yes. The main point that I was trying to make, first of all, is have we actually talked to business, like how many people and businesses is this actually affecting? Have you done any kind of studies on that? And is it certain cell phone companies? Because based on, you know, usage, like is it the same, is it T-Mobile, is it Verizon, is it all of them? Is that something that's been identified yet? My other point is I understand that the FCC sets the health and safety standards, However, I believe that should only apply when considering a permit application from a company. In this instance, the city is proactively requesting this, and therefore I think health impacts should still be a factor, especially since the FCC has not thoroughly reviewed radio frequency exposure limits since 1996. I don't know if you're aware of that. Most of the public assumes that current FCC safety limits for cell phones, cell towers, Wi-Fi, 5G, wireless networks are based upon an up-to-date, robust review of all relevant research. This assumption is clearly documented to be erroneous. In August 2021, there is a U.S. Court of Appeals from D.C. that ruled that the FCC ignored scientific evidence, failed to provide a reasonable explanation for its determination that its 1996 regulations adequately protected the public against all harmful effects of wireless radiation. The legal case challenged the 2019 decision not to update its 1996 regulations regarding allowable RF exposures from wireless technologies, including 5G, cell phones, cell towers, Wi-Fi, and wireless networks. The FCC limits are based on the outdated belief that heating is the only proven harm from RF. Over 11,000 pages of evidence, 447 exhibits in 27 volumes were submitted to the court documenting biological effects, illness from wireless radiation exposure at non-heating levels. Research has found brain damage, headaches, memory problems, reproductive damage, synergistic effects, nervous system impacts, brain cancer, genetic damage, as well as harm to trees, birds, bees, and wildlife. The court ruled that the FCC had failed to meet even the low threshold of reasoned analysis in determining that its limits adequately protect against the harmful effects of exposure. The court criticized the FCC for ignoring substantive evidence of potential environmental harms and failed to address the impacts of technological changes, including 5G. The court sent the issue back to the FCC for a fresh review, a better explanation to justify its 26-year-old standard, which they still have yet to do. So basically, I feel that this is something that's still being decided in the courts. So let that, go through, because I think the new administration is definitely focusing on more health issues, and that this is something that might come back to us when that is finalized, because that's something that's still there. So I think maybe that's something you do need to discuss with your attorney. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Tortolese. Okay, Mr. Bushman, followed by Connie Wiggins.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Ray Bushman. I currently live at 977 Kirkhill Lane in Lake Forest, but I'm here not on behalf of myself, but on behalf of the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. The Lake Forest, and with me is the Executive Director of the Foundation, Jennifer McGregor. As most of you know, the foundation has been existing for over 4 decades, close to 50 years now. And we've worked to preserve, protect, and enhance the exceptional architecture, the beautiful landscapes, and the charming visual character that we have of our city. Not just in the historic districts that are mainly over in the east side, but throughout the whole city. We want developments to be thoughtful, sensitive, and compatible to the surrounding area. The Preservation Foundation did submit 2 pages of comments to the Plan Commission, and they did submit it yesterday afternoon, so I'm assuming you did receive it, and hopefully you gave it, reflected upon what we were saying. And the important thing that we were focused in on is what our city code currently says in governing cell towers. It's quite instructive in terms of the importance that our city code places on minimizing adverse visual impacts of towers with a careful design, siting, landscaping, screening, camouflage techniques. Simply stated, we need to do what we can to minimize the adverse visual effect of any cell tower. And along with meeting this goal, we have a provision in the code that says the person or entity proposing to amend the section is required to demonstrate using technological evidence that the amendment to the overlay district, which is what is being sought here, is necessary in order to satisfy the service requirements of the respective grid system. And I bring it up in light of what several of you have raised as questions, and particularly Commissioner Pincus and Commissioner Thomas. If it was a petitioner coming in, a provider coming in, and he has his evidence supporting the need, you would always question it because he's a for-profit organization. He has his own objectives and goals. Here we have the benefit of the city coming in and being proactive and an opportunity now really to look at this thing, look at the questions that have already been raised and maybe even more questions coming in as to what the technology is, what do we really need here, and have it done by an independent authority that can give us comfort and give our community comfort. This is very important too. You've got a lot of interest here, and they want to know answers to these questions and understand them. Now, I know there's a lot of technology, it'll be way over my head, but there's ways that it can be communicated, but from an independent, authoritative source. I'd encourage that. Also, we have serious concerns, the foundation has serious concerns that a modern monopole of up to 160 feet next to the train station and within the West Lake Forest Neighborhood Business District can satisfy the zoning code, the one that requires we minimize the visual impact. As you know, or hopefully know, much effort, time, and resources have gone into creating and ensuring that Settler Square is compatible with the visual character of Lake Forest in height, scale, and style. A lot of effort has gone into that. Like most towns, our train stations, both east and west, act as a centerpiece to the area. Siting a 160-foot pole, 60-foot monopole to this highly visible area, which is adjacent to residents, will not minimize the adverse visual impact of the tower as our code requires. Just the opposite. It will create such an adverse impact and become the unwelcome focal point of our West Side Neighborhood Business District. As provided in the zoning code, the Preservation Foundation believes the city should first obtain, review the necessary cellular technology from a reputable and independent authority to determine what changes to the services are actually required for this area. And if a monopole of 160 feet is the only viable option, the city should consider alternative sites that would not create an adverse visual impact as would occur if the proposed monopole was constructed.
Very
Thank you
good.
very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bushman. Connie Wiggins, followed by Haley Cropper.
I'm Connie Wiggins, and Jim and I have lived in Lake Forest since 1988, 30 years. And many of the things have been said, so I'm not going to read the email like was asked of me. But I'm very passionate about the safety and health piece of this. And one of the things that Jim and I wanted to make very clear is, although the current law does not restrict the location of wireless facilities and the basis of environmental or health effects from radio frequency emissions, the city should take note of the possible regulation changes that may result from the Trump administration coming on focusing on health. And I think if we don't do this, we're going to be in trouble.
Thank you,
We're
Ms.
already in trouble.
Thank you, Ms. Wiggins. And I love adhering to the rules so well. Nice job. Haley Cropper, followed by Susan Dempf.
Hi, my name is Haley Cropper. I'm at 1035 Sir William Lane. Thank you for having me this evening to speak. Ever since the last meeting when I spoke, I've been trying to understand this process and figure out why our city is not fighting to preserve our town, but instead remove safeguards that protect us from cell phone companies coming in. And now there's a possibility to build a 160-foot tower in our neighborhood where our kids play and go to school. I've read through countless minutes from previous Plan Commission meetings and see that this has been deliberated numerous times, as has been noted. A task force was set up to determine what is best for our town. Existing structures have been looked at, and what the overlay districts were and how they were established were examined. Throughout this process, the city has fought to preserve our community, so why are we going to change it today? In January of 2017, the Technical Advisory Committee discussed how to provide wireless communication while, quote, minimizing visual blight that can result from telecommunication facilities. They recommended that if a new tower was needed, effort should be made to locate this tower in an area that is not in a primary view corridor and in an area where other utility poles and equipment are already located. In that same meeting, tower heights and what were permitted in the existing overlay district were reviewed, and it was noted that the tower building companies will likely always request the maximum tower height since taller towers can accommodate more carriers, generating more revenues. Commissioner Kerr, and I apologize if I mispronounced someone's name, Commissioner Kerr stated that if new towers are needed, the goal should be to find an area where views to the tower from the community are minimized. During the February 2017 Plan Commission meeting, it was discussed that the updated language to the codes give priority to sites that minimize adverse visual impacts on the community's character and to sites that are screened by vegetation, topography, or the presence of utility poles, such as in an area along a major transportation corridor. At the same meeting, Commissioner Berg commented that Lake Forest is a special community and that once the character of the community is lost, it cannot be recovered. He stated that the community processes have served this community well to preserve and protect the character and that aesthetic review is important. In 2011, T-Mobile requested to add a 100-foot tower at 920 Waukegan Road, so roughly in the same area we're discussing today, and the representative from the company stated that they had a lease option with Private Bank to locate a tower south of the bank in the parking lot. This tower would have antennas concealed like a flagpole for aesthetic reasons, and this was in 2011. Chairman Reisenberg stated his preference not to see a tower at this location. He encouraged the petitioner to work with the city staff and the consultant to evaluate alternative sites if in fact a need for a tower is documented. He stated that the solution should focus on preserving the character of the community. I also noticed while reading through old minutes that companies who are wanting to build on the Everett-Waukegan corridor discussed a grid, their company grid, and what they were trying to achieve. So this grid was not something that's just for our city, but what the company was wanting the grid to be for itself. Is this location for the tower being placed here for the residents of Lake Forest or because it's best for the company's grid? It is also apparent that cell companies were most concerned with the traffic that passes through this area of town, as well as businesses in the area. But it appears service for residents in the area would only marginally improve, as evident in the coverage maps included in the packet. Are we looking for a solution for the residents of West Lake Forest or for the people driving through our town, Instacart shoppers, and of course the tower company? In 2018, an amendment was proposed for small wireless facilities in response to new legislation. It was noted at this meeting that, quote, Lake Forest has a history of encouraging wireless providers to build out small wireless facilities in the community rather than erect new towers. It went on to say that new legislation may give the city leverage to push providers in that direction since small wireless facilities must be allowed with that new legislation. Before new towers are permitted, providers will need to prove smaller facilities are not workable for a certain area. So I would also like to ask, in this situation, are small wireless facilities not workable because it's not the benefit of the residents or because it's not the benefit of the cell phone companies? And just the map with the green dots and the red dots, there's a lot of co-location on the east side, but I didn't notice co-location on the west side, so. That's it.
Very good.
Great,
Thank you, Ms. Cropper. Susan Dempf, followed by Katie May.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Susan Dempf. I live at 1240 West Cascade Court in Lake Forest. Lake Forest Code calls for cell towers to not be built where they're visible. Ms. Zerniak stated that the Woodlands Tower is visible from Western and other roads. I suggest that that tower is located on a 41-acre parcel. The proposed tower will be visible year-round, and it is suggested for a parking lot area that is smaller than the one at Sunset Foods. It will be highly visible. The city and residents take pride in the beauty of the city. In early 2022, I chose to purchase a home in this community. During my real estate hunt in West Lake Forest, I used my cell phone to search on websites, to communicate with my realtor, and to navigate to properties, all on my phone in my car. I had no issue with the cell phone service. The area in question has been referred to many times this evening as the West Lake Forest Business District. I ask that you not consider it exclusively as a business district. This is an area with homes and well-established neighborhood that draw professionals like myself to want to live in this community. Please do not just consider it for the businesses. Additionally, I'm going to propose, if I asked to have the tower on my property on West Cascade Court, the neighbors would be up in arms and the city would say no. Why is it that the neighbors present here tonight are up in arms? The comments are overwhelmingly being shared with you that are saying no. There are stickers that say no, yet this is being considered. Lastly, I question, would this same proposal be considered if it was in the downtown Lake Forest district, in the train station that serves the eastern part of our community? I'm not so sure that it would. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Katie May, followed by Victor Briscoe, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anybody's name. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Katie May, and I've been a Lake Forest resident for about 11 years now. I'm 1230 Conway Road, so pretty close to the tower. I'm not here to fight the tower over health concerns, but since that information was included in the packet, I'd like to address it briefly. Barrett, you mentioned in the last meeting that it's your libertarian spirit that often makes you ask for a second opinion. Like you, I don't blindly trust information, especially when it's of this magnitude. We're all aware that citizen journalism is thriving while legacy media is dead, and government-controlled agency narratives sometimes face scrutiny and are often wrong. That's why I decided to dig deeper. Kathy, the information in your packet and in your answer to Barrett this evening is actively being challenged in the federal courts. In 2021, the EHT, Environmental Health Trust, sued the FCC and won. The court ordered the FCC to update their guidelines. The court found that the FCC failed to consider adequate evidence to potential health risks from RF radiation emitted by cell towers and other wireless devices. The current guidelines the FCC presents are from studies and data that are from 1996. Again, the current FCC studies and data that say cell towers poses no harm haven't been updated in over 30 years. Furthermore, the court ordered the FCC to address non-thermal radiation effects, which it hadn't done in the past. It's been over 3 years since the case ruling, and the FCC has been silent on providing any update and revised standards. I wonder if the board and the city planning are aware of this outstanding court order. Another thing I'd like to address that was mentioned in the presentation is the safety concern with the emergency communication for medical staff and EMS teams. I want to point out that the city recently approved a $125,000 budget in July 2024 for a new highly advanced radio system called StarCom. Lake Forest is one of the last cities to roll this out statewide, which is promising since there are already over 130 towers in place, meaning the installation will be efficient. StarCom boasts an impressive 99.999% accuracy for calls, which would significantly improve our emergency response. Kathy, do you know where the StarCom's like update is on that. It would be nice, to hear. Additionally, in terms of public safety, it's widely known that a 911 call can connect through any nearby tower, ensuring that assistance is accessible regardless of location. This addresses the communication concern directly and eliminates the need for additional infrastructure. I would also like to point out that the FCC has adopted new rules requiring wireless carriers to implement location-based routing. This approach uses the caller's precise location rather than just the cell tower's location to route the call directly to the appropriate public safety answering point, thereby improving response times and accuracy. With that said, I want to thank you for expanding the options since your last gathering on October 9th. Residents strongly oppose the train station location. It would be an eyesore, changing the character of our town and lower property values. The stigma around these structures remains, and people simply don't want to live near them. These are valid concerns, even if some argue that there's no visual or health impact. I'm here today with a petition of over 700 Lake Forest residents that signed this, and I can let you guys see this at I'll just leave it with Kathy. That number, 700 and counting, represents 30 to 50% of Lake Forest active voting populations. This percentage is based on the average of 1,500 to 4,000 residents that turn out for local elections. Please honor the majority of this community and consider other options for this tower to go up, not in the West Lake Forest train station. The only option would be the dump, as it's out of sight. The dump monopole could be a good interim solution, since we will all be using Starlink or other satellites sooner rather than later. Starlink is projected to roll out voice services in 2025, which will make traditional cell towers dinosaurs and obsolete. Currently, Starlink already supports texting, so we're just like a year away from, satellites. Please do not change the code, and if you must, only change the code for the dump. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Victor Briscoe, followed by Lexi Rasha.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Victor Briscoe, 1275 Cascade Court. I and many of my neighbors are strongly opposed. We're deeply disturbed that the city would think of this location, would even consider it at this location. This is the central business district of the west part of town. We want cell service, but we're not required to put a tower right there. This doesn't feel right to me. This doesn't feel right to everybody here. If it doesn't feel right to you, even if you're on the fence, it must be a no, is what I feel. So I've read the packets, watched the meetings. Residents haven't been offered a survey, but I noticed at the last meeting, there was some letters discussed. It sounds like those were sent to the city based off of an online post encouraging people to speak for the tower. Only a few responded and results were mixed. But notably, some people, after learning more, have changed their mind to no from that group. In the packet tonight, I think two of the respondents changed their mind after learning more. But in that last meeting, it almost felt like that online letter was attempted to be used as justification, like, oh, the community does want this, and I don't think that's the case. It was a small sample size and pretty biased, so we didn't get a broad survey, but we have the petition that Katie mentioned, and we have turnout tonight, a lot of voices. This is our survey that shows the community does not want this. I also reviewed the packet about the coverage. Even with the tower built, there's still large gaps in coverage. Only serving the motorists, I think it's been discussed. I'll try to skim this part. A small area of homes just to a couple blocks east and west could benefit from the service part. Sadly, a lot of the people that were on that email may not get the service that they were hoping for either. So a massive tower is not the only way to deliver service. In fact, it may not be the best way to deliver the newer generations of technologies. Currently with 5G, as we heard, they require smaller scale access points, not very few large towers. As future generations come online, these other technologies are going to be more useful. And the pole, it seems like somebody mentioned earlier, these arrays are directional. So every provider will have to stack going in different directions to truly provide broadest service. That's why it's so tall, and you've got multiple providers, so it'll get very high. Lastly, why here? Why the central business district? It's the most visible place. It's off the map. I know that it didn't show it in the red colors, but just to the west, just to the south, there's arrays. They're relevant because they're there. They just weren't on the representation there. So again, why choose the most visible place? Previous city planning boards put so much thought into this space and previously rejected towers. We see boards put a lot of thought into this, and we're talking about putting the largest structure in the area there with a large windowless building as well. I'll try to wrap it up because a lot was covered. So we should keep this space as it's intended. This is a desirable business district. The storefronts are full, actually. If the banks are redeveloped, that could be more storefronts. I think our job is to make this area a desirable place to shop, a desirable place to live and work and commute, invest there. So we're doing all these things right. It's the beauty and appearance and preservation and architecture. Please continue on that path. This tower is none of that. That's why you should vote no for this and end it immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Briscoe. Lexi Rasha, followed by Gabriella Gaetano.
Good evening. My name is Lexi Rasha. I live at 1345 Kimmer Court, which is right near Everett Elementary School. A little bit about me. My husband and I live here with my 9-year-old son who goes to Everett Elementary, and I have a 4-year-old daughter in preschool. I serve on the executive board for Spirit of 67, and I am the new family coordinator for the APT at Everett Elementary School. My family and I, we shop local, we attend local sporting events, and we really just enjoy all aspects of Lake Forest. We're active participants in the community, and we genuinely really love living here. What brings me here tonight is my dismay at the city's petition to amend the Personal Wireless Service Facilities Overlay District of the City of Lake Forest zoning code. It is questionable as why the city initiated this change of ordinance. We have these ordinances and processes in place to protect residents, as well as our community from being taken advantage of. It is the responsibility of the telecommunications company to begin this petition to amend the code and follow procedure outlined in our city ordinance. The city has taken it upon themselves to start this process to provide a shortcut for future telecom companies. It is like you are turning off the alarm, unlocking the door, showing the hideaway key, and just letting them right into our beautiful city, and I'm not okay with that. You changing the code is giving away our power to define where we can put it up from third parties. I spoke at length with an attorney from a prominent power plant tower company, and he was shocked at how our city is leaving us vulnerable by changing this code. He thinks it is bizarre that we are proactively doing this and just leaving ourselves wide open, and I really do trust his opinion. Everyone keeps asking, why are you doing this? So why are these complaints and desires of cell service for some outweighing this entire majority? You mentioned local businesses wanting this amendment. John Cortese of Sunset Foods wants better cell service because Instacart employees are complaining. Instacart employees they're shopping there for us, okay? They're not residents here. We live here. We're the customers. We're the residents that live here. We should be considered. If their apps aren't working at full speed, may I suggest Mr. Cortese calls Comcast and gets better Wi-Fi for his store. Again, the desires of some should not dictate the majority. The people standing right here tonight are your majority. We do not want this code changed. At the last meeting, it was suggested to not get emotional about this. I have to say that is easier said than done. My 2 kids are my world. I moved here for them. I live here for them. I am their last line of defense, and anything this world throws at them, and in today's day and age, that is a huge burden to bear. It is very hard for me to not get emotional about your petition to change our codes to allow for 1 or multiple cell towers to be built in such close proximity to my home and their school. I know you are not required to consider health, as I've been reminded, but that doesn't make it right. It is not going to stop me from being educated about what risks you are forcing on my children. The most of it, I was going to bring up cases that have already been mentioned, so I'm not going to go there.
Thank you.
I'm not done yet, though. I do understand that we're not obligated to consider health, but at thought it was kind of ironic how a zero-risk health sheet was included in this packet provided by the Wireless Infrastructure Association. It would be my suggestion for the future to dig into current United States legislation and read about cities across the country that have fought the cell towers to protect children and families against the risk previously mentioned by other people. I also will say off the cuff, I am not from here. I did not grow up here. My husband and I moved here from River Forest. My family's from the west side of Chicago. And growing up, Lake Forest was the nicest and best place you could live. And I'm not just talking about Illinois, I'm talking about the Midwest, okay? It is known to be the most beautiful, nicest place to live. So I am having a very hard time understanding why we are just bending to telecom companies when instead we could be strengthening our codes. For example, Ithaca, New York, their proactive approach is to strengthen their codes, okay? Update 20-year-old codes to make them stronger. For instance, Ithaca, New York requires telecom companies to have general liability insurance without the exception of pollution, which means if anyone pops up with brain tumors, dizziness, excessive vomiting, disorientation, they're liable because it's emissions from RF. So Ithaca, New York is protecting that way. Ithaca, New York is saying you may not build a tower within 500 to 1,000 feet from a school. It cannot be in a neighborhood. I forgot who said it before me. I think it was you. But basically, we cannot categorize this as a business district because I ride my bike to Starbucks with my family. I walk my kid to religious education at St. Pat's. I cross that train track all the time. Can I do one closing thing? I did request additional time before this meeting.
Right, but that was
That's it.
not granted. Yes, go ahead.
In
Wrap up.
closing, I ask you to look at the crowd of residents standing with me this evening and consider them. Care about your community and neighbors. We didn't move here for impeccable cell service. We moved here to build a life. We chose this community for its quiet charm, its natural beauty, and its tight-knit spirit. That spirit is threatened when development prioritizes profit over people. Please do not do this.
Thank you. Okay, Gabriela Gaetano, followed by Tom Bohar.
Hello, good evening. My name is Gabriela Caetano. My husband and I, we live in 6 cities over the last 10 years, and we choose West Lake Forest to raise our family. We moved here in 2021 with our daughter, who next year will attend Everett Elementary School, and with our 2 boys that were born here and probably will go to the school too. I go to the park on Everett on daily basis with my kids. I shop at Sunset Market. My daughter dances ballet at Lo Mastro. I'm pretty confident that I can say that I am over there. I am the community. Saying that, for me, it was a big surprise when I heard that the city of Lake Forest was planning to change the city plan with the aim of pushing for a huge cell phone tower on my backyard. The city that was supposed to protect the residents, the kids, the schools, the parks, and the visual of the city are the ones who are pushing for this. I've talked with all my neighbors around me, and no one have any idea of this project that will directly affect our daily lives. At no point the city considered what residents thought about this. So today I'm here to ask to all of you to protect our community. A cell phone tower would be an aesthetic issue that do not match with the area. It can increase the chance of accidents, fire, additional noise. It will increase radiation, which we all know how prejudicial can be, especially with kids, and will decrease the value of our properties. I trust you do the right thing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Bohar, followed by Emily, can't make out the last name. My eyes are getting really
It's
bad.
actually my wife.
Okay, there you go.
So, yeah.
All right, good. Easy enough.
Yep, so Tom Bohar,
Okay.
I live at 1311 Fiore Drive.
Oh, yeah,
so
there you go.
Right behind Everett Elementary. So first I want to thank all of you. I know it's a thankless job, and I may have put some of you to sleep with the correspondence I sent in. Thank you, Chairman, for reading it. And so, yeah, I'll own up to putting the legal question in. And I would appreciate if, I know after the meeting, sometime this week I could get the response or a chance to talk with the city attorney, just for my own edification, but also to make sure that we're protecting the commission. You know, whether or not you can consider health impacts, very important. The preemption is very important, especially looking at, you know, the weight of letters that were received that referenced it, and the fact that this is a very unique request where the petitioners aren't the carriers. You're not putting in any additional restrictions. The commission is looking to reduce restrictions. So the only one who stands to be harmed are potentially the residents for losing that protection. I do want to, so I don't want to address that, you saw it in the writing, but I do want to address a question or a comment that came up from Commissioner Naring here earlier that I thought was a fantastic question. I wasn't sure that was fully addressed, which the question was essentially, can you rank the locations? I say we like the compost center A5 the best. If you can't do that, can you do an exam, figure out that doesn't work, 1, 2, 3. That's actually fairly easy to do through an amendment. You're not being asked right now to approve everything or nothing. You could approve an amendment solely for A5, which is the compost location. I would recommend against ranking because that just asks the carriers to game it and say, hey, look, we'll find some reason not to do A5. You already picked A6 all the way down. We'll knock them out. They can still do that. They can file for an amendment under 159, 164, like they can do today. So this would allow the city to offer a location that seems to work in the compost center, at least adequately, while not opening up the floodgates to say, let's put it in the middle of the central business district within a residential area. The other point I wanted to raise was that even if we assume you can't consider health impacts, I think it's important to consider the weight of people speaking to it. And the reason being there is that the anxiety that it's creating is not a direct impact of the radio frequency radiation, but it directly impacts the desirability of living in Westlake Forest, in the neighborhoods nearby. It has a direct correlation to the property values. I know that we did a lot of looking when we were looking to move into the area. We moved 2 years ago, and my wife's going to talk to it, I'm sure, because it was high on her list. We knocked places out that had cell tower power lines, and I know that we're not alone in my demographic. Younger folks moving out of the city looking to come up into Lake Forest, largely because of the pristine area. By keeping the cell towers into areas that are not adjacent to residential, we're preserving the value of those homes. And in fact, many of the folks who moved in did so almost relying on that. The zoning code has been in place for over a quarter of a century. There's no thought, why would this be changed, right? We're relying on that, we're moving in to protect it. And I guess the last bit that I want to talk about is going all the way to the beginning. The whole purpose of zoning, when it was implemented in this country centuries ago, was to protect that reliance interest of the community, to allow people to move in and know, I'm moving into a residential area. I'm not going to have a nuisance put in. Coming to a nuisance, that's on you. Putting it in, that's the reason we have zoning. And I would just really respectfully ask the commission to consider that in your deliberation. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Emily, you're up, followed by Diane Casuto.
Hi, I'm Emily Bohack, and my husband just spoke. I will keep this fairly short. We've heard a lot of different sentiments tonight, and I share most of them in opposition. I just wanted to have my voice heard and recorded at this meeting because I'm deeply disappointed in how the city is handling this as a newer resident, a younger resident, a mom who has a 1-year-old daughter at home, and moved to this area knowing from friends and coworkers and others of generations before me of the character, the care, and the way in which this city operates. And I know that there are many different people that are involved in decisions that are made, but the way that we were informed about this the information that we have learned about how the city has gone about this is deeply disturbing. And I do just want to share that disappointment as a younger family and as a family who, among other families here tonight, speak to others who live in the city and are looking to relocate, who want to look for a new community, and who want to know that they are going to be cared for and that due process is going to be followed. And so I'd just like to urge those here tonight to really listen to, as I know you are, the voices of the community, and to ensure that whatever decision you do make, that the information is shared and that those who are impacted, who live here and have built their lives here, who have purchased property with, as my husband mentioned, the reliance on this being a residential zoning area, have decided to be in this community. And I really urge you to take that seriously, because we are also the community that will bring in others who will build the community in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane Casuto, followed by Pam Kehoe.
I communicated to Ms. Cerniak and my alderman my ideas that I would have said tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Kehoe. Then after Diane Casuto, we're going to go with Andrew Bartolotta.
Good evening. My name is Diane Casuto, and I live at 1200 Wild Rose Lane. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak here tonight. First, I need to apologize. I'm sorry. I've not had the opportunity to read the package from today, so my comments are going to be based on the information I gleaned from the package from October 9th. I think a lot of what I have in my prepared speech here is something that already has been said, so I will not go over it again. I'll spare all of you. But there is one thing I would like to say. What concerns me probably most about this single site proposal is that I personally suspect it is the cheapest and the most profitable route for the tower builder and the self-service providers. And that really begs the question of whether or not we're looking at a take it or leave it scenario, where these companies will not proceed unless they get their way. Our city codes be damned. And neither the Plan Commission or City Council should succumb to this kind of coercion, which puts the interests and, quite frankly, the bottom line of the multi-billion-dollar telecommunications industry ahead of the welfare and the concerns of the residents here, who are the actual taxpayers of this city. Our city codes were designed to actually protect us from this kind of overreach, and they should not be dismissed or just, they should not be ignored or summarily dismissed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Casuto. Okay, Andrew Bartolotta, followed by Jennifer Lawson.
Thank you. I'll start by saying it's hard to go 20th tonight and have anything new to say, so I'm jealous of those who got called earlier. My name's Andrew Bartolotta. I live in the Arbor Ridge subdivision at 1056 Sir William Lane, and I stand before you tonight because I care deeply about my home, my neighborhood, and my community at large. I'd like to start with a question. Could putting a tower at the proposed site ever be considered a win if it comes at the expense of so many of us who are directly impacted? There has to be a way to solve this issue without forcing a cell tower on neighbors who do not want it. I urge you to consider the views of the people who live closest to this site. Your neighbors, those of us who will look out our windows every day and see this tower. We don't want this. You hear us. Okay? If this is about fixing cell service, let's put it where those who genuinely want it live, because I can assure you that is not the people who live closest to this site. Let's find a solution together that respects those who live near the proposed site and love this area. Our neighbor made the same point, so I'll keep this brief, but if residents complained about poor cell service in East Forest and the telecom company suggested a 150-foot tower right in the heart of downtown Lake Forest, would you approve it? the backlash would be immediate and fierce. People who live in and around town, the downtown area, would not stand for it. I wouldn't stand for it as a resident of this city either. Why then is it okay to do this on the west side of town? It sure feels a lot like we are being treated like second-class citizens. Planning Commission members, this city, our community, we are better than this. Don't take the easy way out by putting up this tower to solve one group's complaints at the expense of another. Do not harm those who simply want to protect their homes and their community. Let's find a win-win solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barlota. Jennifer Lawson, followed by Antoinette. I'm not even going to try the last name. Sorry. So.
Thank you for your careful attention to this matter, and thank you, Kathy, for your careful preparation. I called you, I remember, because I didn't know what was going on, and you were very willing to provide the information, and I appreciate that. I don't have much to say. I don't know if the 150-foot tower is the answer. Maybe it's not, and I'm really glad I'm not in your shoes. But I can tell you that we need cell phone signal. I live at 955 Pinecroft, and I work from home. I'm an attorney. We have a lot of telemeetings. On the days when the Wi-Fi goes down, which are rare, but maybe 3 times this year, so not nothing, I have to take time off work. I have to call in and say, I'm sorry, I don't have, well, try and call in. I can't even send them an email. I say, I'm sorry, something came up and I don't have signal and I can't do this work today. My husband is also a teleworker. My family lives on Lakewood Drive. I can't go there because they have the same issue with the cell phone signal. So those are difficult times. And so I just want to let you know that while I don't know about this particular amendment and this 150-foot tower that seems excessive, we do need a solution, and I hope that the commission's work on finding that solution doesn't stop if this amendment isn't approved.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Okay, Antoinette.
Hulata.
Okay.
I live at 740 Jennifer Court in
One
Lake
sec.
Forest.
Pat Weiland, you're on deck. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to quickly address the image of the monopole. It was mailed out to nearby residences a couple weeks ago, and it appears in the packet tonight and has been highlighted by the petitioner. Though this image does not claim to be actual size, it is placed in the targeted location and is meant to conceptualize what a flagpole type installation would look like at the Westlake Forest train station. This concept image is very misleading because when compared to the existing topography in the photo, it's actually representative of only a 65-foot monopole with a comparably sized down diameter and a very underscaled base. This absolutely is not what a 160-foot cell tower would look like at the Westlake Forest train station. The reality is that it was just described as 150 feet by 30 feet at its base. It would require an 8-foot high brick wall to enclose its over 4,500 square feet, which is equivalent to 27 parking spaces. This is considerably larger than what was discussed at last month's meeting and even in the packet that was released on Friday. And the 15-story tower protruding from it would have a diameter of up to 5 feet at its base. This would not look like or be confused for a flagpole, which is in comparison is typically 20 to 25 feet tall and 3 inches in diameter at its base. The monopole would be at least 6 times the height of a typical flagpole and up to 20 times its diameter. It will look like a monstrosity lurking high above the trees and buildings in our business district. I'm not against cell towers, but I believe that we should utilize common sense where we put them. Let's follow the precedents and support cell tower locations outside of the business district and away from residences. And if tonight we're being led to believe that a 160-foot cell tower at the recycling center just 1 mile to the north of the target area cannot provide sufficient service, I ask you, how closely do we need to place towers to receive adequate coverage? Every mile, every 6 blocks? What is the desired outcome, and how will this change the image of Lake Forest? At the previous meeting, one of the members of the Plan Commission brought up a great point. He asked if 5G small cell technology was an option to improve service in the area. The petitioner responded that we cannot force providers to build out specific types of technology.
but also stated that the option is available. In fact, our codes have proactively been amended to accommodate this technology to be installed on top of light posts and would require no code change at all. On the east side of town, they have done just this. They have built out a DAS, which stands for a distributed antenna system, and have installed the latest technologies atop utility and light posts to improve service. The east side currently only has 2 cell towers, as opposed to the west side's current 4. The city had utilized a thoughtful approach to cell service on the east side that considers the residents and community at large. By combining the DAS and thoughtfully located cell towers in conjunction with the antenna, the city has avoided throwing up 160-foot monopoles on the east side. I think that residents on the west side should be afforded similar consideration. And though it is true that we cannot force providers to build out certain technologies, at the same time, providers cannot make us change our codes. These codes were put in place to protect residents, their property, and to preserve the character of this beautiful and historic town. Why are we seeking a code change and ruining our town for a telecommunications company when people who reside in this town and pay taxes to the city clearly do not want this tower? Let's prioritize alternative options and site locations that have less impact on our community and residents. I urge you to listen to the people of the community rather than outside corporations whose primary responsibility is profit. I also have to touch on the irony that exists in the room and further highlights the discrepancy in consideration provided to the east side. Here we stand discussing the possible construction of a 160-foot cell tower right in the middle of our business district, which will certainly compromise the visual integrity of Lake Forest's west side. In stark contrast, next month's meeting will be devoted to discussions of a beautification project for the city's east side. The draft entitled Bank Lane Streetscape Enhancement Plans details burying unsightly overhead utilities, laying new pavers on the street and sidewalks, and installing granite curb planters. Let's keep the west side beautiful too. And I also just want to address one thing that was described as a cell tower desert, I believe it was called. There's actually sites that are just outside of this mapped area that are not in Lake Forest, 3 blocks to the west on Everett Road, and also just at the corner here of Route 22 and I-94, that neighborhoods here all pull from. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Wyland, followed by Daniel Kalina.
Hi, my name is Pat Wyland. I live at 884 Gloucester Crossing, which is right behind Sunset Foods. So I find the proposal of this tower unsightly, but I also appreciate the need for improved cell service. The cell service driving north and south on Waukegan and also in my neighborhood is intermittent and unreliable. I myself have to use a cell phone booster in my home, and still it's somewhat unreliable. And I appreciate everybody's comments here tonight. I thought they were all valid, but I do have some questions regarding what the Planning Commission's authority is with respect to making this decision. If they have a requirement to get a majority of the residents' votes, and what the future plans are with respect to additional hearings on this topic, if you would mind answering those. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Daniel Kalina, followed by Eric Wilson.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm the unfortunate soul from the tower company here. The tower company is called Vertical Bridge, and I live in Batavia, so 45 minutes away. I've been sort of behind the scenes on that side of things throughout this process. This tower is we have both AT&T and Verizon fully on board for this tower. They'll install right away when we build it, if we were ever to be so fortunate to build it. And we've spoken to T-Mobile, and they have a need as well. So, and the tower would also be built for an additional 4th carrier, like a Dish or what have you. So, to be honest with you folks, we're not here making a specific proposal. This is a rezoning hearing. I don't have a speech prepared. I have some notes here. I'm going to go over a few things, but to be honest, I wanted to come here just to more so listen, because Vertical Bridge is the largest privately held tower company which makes us by far the most flexible, which is why we're able to do some of the things that you saw in the handout. So, okay. First, quick note on safety. I think, you know, there might be some true disagreements over who has the jurisdiction to comment on safety. The FCC has sole jurisdiction. Look, I don't live in the city, but if I did, I would also consider safety in a wider sense. I wouldn't want to be on the train without cell service, personally. So, there were some comments about the view shed, the photo sims, the angle, what have you. We're happy to provide as many angles as we need, however many other studies that need to happen. If you want to see what the tower looks like from a mile away, 2 miles away, we'll do a study. We'll provide more angles. We don't believe they're misleading. That's certainly not why we provide multiple angles so as to prevent that. We'll provide more. There was a question as to why this tower is not being proposed on private property. Great question. So with regards to the proposal at the train station, the tower company is being prompted to pursue this on behalf of the carrier. So Verizon came to us and said, look, we have a dead area and we need service. You have basically a quarter mile of real estate where you can place a piece of infrastructure. Obviously, the signal extends well beyond that quarter mile, but the infrastructure needs to be in this tight little search area in order to be viable. Okay, well, easily half of that quarter mile is residential. That's not right away. I think we can all agree on that. In terms of the commercial space, across the tracks, we explored that thoroughly. We contacted everyone. I actually called the Catholic Church personally after they told our other people no. And they told me no, and that's why I'm here today. Because I knew that we would have to exhaust all remedies before coming to the city for a controversial proposal, because nobody likes that. And so we did exhaust our remedies, and we're willing to provide affidavits to the such. Coverage maps. There's a question as to why the coverage maps are not identical. Great question. In a nutshell, it's because each carrier has their own license frequencies. Frequencies are not identical. They're exclusive, which prevents interference. Actually, the maps cannot be identical. That is not possible. But there are other variables at play. You know, one may have, they all build out their networks at different speed, and it is a whole, so they're just different networks entirely, okay? There is also a question as to, okay, well, my cell phone doesn't work well at home. I can fix this by purchasing other so-called boosters or what have you. Can't there be a large-scale booster so we don't have to do a cell tower? I'm afraid that my answer is simply a flat no. The cell tower is the booster. I can tell you that Verizon and AT&T don't want to spend the money, but we're here begging the city to let us. There was a question about, I see I'm out of time.
Yep.
I won't take more time than I'm allotted, but I do appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you folks. And if we're denied, the carriers will just move the funding to another suburb and improve coverage there. So,
Thank you, Mr. Kleena. Aaron Wilson, followed by Judy Gavour.
Hi, I'm Erin Wilson. I live at 1090 Windhaven Court. A lot of what I'm going to say has already been said, but I'll be fast. My name is Erin Wilson. I live with my husband and 3 children in the Arbor Ridge neighborhood in Westlake Forest. We moved here about 3 years ago after considering a few North Shore communities. We chose Lake Forest based on the schools, the tight-knit community, and the historic preservation. I'm very thankful to live in such a beautiful place. We've heard that they were putting a cell phone tower in the center of Lake Forest. I was upset. But when I heard they were trying to remove a code in order to approve it, I was shocked. The code is put into place to protect our beautiful community. Specifically, I ask that you not amend Code 159153 of the Zoning Code C1. Personal wireless services facilities should be located and designed to minimize any adverse effect they may have on residential property values and to minimize the impact on the site on the surrounding neighborhood. Please don't change what makes Lake Forest Lake Forest. We are very concerned about our and our neighborhood's property value as a 150-foot plus tower is visible from our kitchen and our family room windows, as well as every time we enter and leave our neighborhood. Your proposal notes that Verizon can be added to the recycling center, and I don't understand why we're not looking at the recycling center. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Gavor, followed by David Rose.
Good evening. My name is Judy Gavor. I moved to Lake Forest in 1964. I graduated from the high school. When it came time to retire, we moved back here in 2007 because this is the community. In all the places that we've lived in the United States, this is the one that we love the most. I'm asking, again, the Planning Commission to please not change the rules. Please do not change the code. I think it's inappropriate to put to what I believe to be an eyesore where the whole world can see. The train station is visible. I respect our Preservation Council and Committee for trying to keep the character of Lake Forest, and I feel that this would be a big mistake. I appreciate all the work that Kathy and her committee have done, but at this time, everything I've heard is just a big no. And so until something is proposed that can be more viable, I really don't want to open us up and change the code and make us vulnerable. So please don't vote yes. Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. David Rose, followed by Alex Parmachek.
Hi, good evening. My name is David Rose. I live in the 4th Ward on White Oak Road, 0.8 of a mile from the train station. I've lived here since 2013. My kids went to school at Deer Path and graduated from Lake Forest High School. They had AT&T service till 2019. Terrible service, could never talk to parents from home or get a text. Had to step out of school to make a call. Really hard during applying to college and following up on application things. We switched to Verizon in 2019. It has not improved. So what I really, I don't want to say that I'm in support of the cell tower. What I would like to do is challenge everyone in this room, and especially you guys. It's a false choice to say that we either stick our head in the ground and say no to this cell tower location, but yes to bad cell service. We can live in a beautiful community. I love Lake Forest, and we can have good cell service. Mr. Thomas, your comment about cell phone extenders, Verizon says you use Wi-Fi calling. If I had reliable Comcast service, I could get Wi-Fi calling. My wife works from home, travels about 30% of the time, but have a devil of a time keeping the internet going when she's doing calls that suck bandwidth. And then I have no cell service. Right now I have 2 bars on my phone. I would say that this proposition, when I read about it in the Chicago Tribune, totally confused me. It made me think that the city didn't know what they were doing, because West Lake Forest doesn't have a cell phone problem. All of Lake Forest has a cell phone problem. This idea that we're going to solve West Lake Forest with this, Jagunda Tower, and then on the east side, we have another solution. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I was a trustee on the library board for 6 years, from 2016 to 2022. I bank in Lake Forest downtown. I shop at Jewel. I go to CVS, and if they don't have Wi-Fi working in the store, I'm dead. I cannot get cell service. And I don't know why more people don't complain. I wish I had Verizon Fios service so that I had reliable internet. I've got AT&T, which is 100 gigabytes, and I have Comcast, which is so unreliable it's ridiculous. Go look at reviews. It's below 2.0 on a 5 scale. So Lake Forest suffers from bad telecom everywhere. I'm sure you guys have oversight to cable. Cable would be a great way to start so we could at least have reliable cell phone service in our home. And then I have 2 dogs. I have a golden retriever and a lab, and I walk all over the 4th Ward, 4 or 5 miles a day. All day long, we walk all different places. And I have calls drop constantly. My brother lives in Traverse City. He has T-Mobile. I'm the one losing his call, and I live in a major metro area, the 3rd largest metro area in the United States, and I don't have good cell service. So I just want to highlight, it is a false choice for this room to ask you to say no to the cell tower and damn us to bad cell service. I think that's the easy way out. When I was on the library board, I worked for 6 years to get the library updated and improved so that we had accessible bathrooms and an elevator. And part of that came from updating the systems in the building, which are really old, 100 years old. And the misinformation in this community was legion. Many people in this room spread misinformation. The people in this community that have disability problems and mobility challenges still can't go to the bathroom at the library. They still can't get to the bottom level in the elevator in a wheelchair. And I would challenge this community to not let the library's failure to, Lake Forest is kind of where progress goes to die. Don't let that be your legacy on this committee. Be the committee that fixes telecom in Lake Forest. And maybe it starts with cell service, maybe it then goes to cable and opening up more cable service to come in Lake Forest. But I would, if this cell tower is not the right location, figure out how to identify different technology in different locations with incentives to providers to build it. I live 0.8 of a mile. I don't know if I'm going to see this thing in the air or not. I don't know if it's going to benefit me. Right now, I get it from Lincolnshire, and then I have to get on Waukegan to drive south or walk across Waukegan with my dogs to get cell service from Bannockburn. But I want cell service in Lake Forest, and I think it's a false choice to say it's this tower in this parking lot, or we have to wait another 5 to 10 years for a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Alex Parmachek, followed by Greg Fehrenbach.
Good evening, everybody. First off, I'd like to say I'm really proud of everyone in this room speaking up, sharing your views on this. I think it's a very important thing. I live on 1279 Cager in Arbor Ridge, been here a couple years. I grew up in a town nearby, always envied Lake Forest for its traditions, its culture, the beauty, the aesthetic, everything there is to name. Tonight, you've heard from, I don't even know, 100 people and counting, for a lot of the reasons that we should not move forward with changing this code, but more specifically, not putting this giant tower in the middle of West Lake Forest, running up against a community that's very dense and a growing population with a lot of young families and young kids, people who have been here multiple generations, multiple schools, and our quote-unquote business district, which I don't think is the reason a lot of us moved here in the first place. I'd like everyone to really just consider this. There are clearly a lot of pros and cons that go into decision making. And from what I've heard, there's a lot more cons here with this location than there are pros. I don't really know any pros other than the fact that most of us in this room can agree that the cell phone service in Lake Forest is not ideal. I don't think a lot of us moved here for good cell phone service. I just want you guys to really consider the fact that there is a lot more at stake here. I encourage us finding a solution. But based on everything I heard and the rationale behind putting this tower in the train station, there's no logic behind it, other than maybe infrastructure in place that makes it cheaper for the company to build it from the onset. There has to be a different solution. We need to work together to come to it, but in the meantime, there's just no way we can accept this code change. There's just no way. There's way too much of a majority of the people here that feel very passionate about it, and that will be directly impacted by it for generations to come. I want to be here for a long time. I want to raise my kids here. They're going to go to school at Everett, Deer Path, all that. But I don't want to do that at the expense of them being potentially exposed to health risks and among the other, major negative things that have been brought up tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Greg Fehrenbach, followed by Rod Johnson.
Good evening. I think we're near the end. No, I was one of the last ones to put the name in, so I don't think you have any more to go. But I want to thank staff. I want to thank the commission for listening to everybody. I've been to a number of issues. I've lived on the west side for 22 years. I sent you a long 2-page email about infrastructures of buildings that affect cell phone reception, but also transmission. And people don't understand, your cell phone only puts out so many watts. It can only go through so many walls before inside the building you're going to lose a call along with the commuters. But I do have a question for Kathy Zerniak about the light. On your handout, the water tower is 162 feet with the array, and there's a light on it. So I think the FAA may require a light. They changed their code October 29th, 2024. Two weeks ago, they eliminated paragraph 2.8. trying to describe what 500 feet is and the lights you need. And if you look at their schematics, structures 150 feet need lights. I did not see if the water tower has a light further on down. I know there's one on top, doesn't blink, it's there. I assume they're going to require that. We do have military exercises over Arbor Ridge. I live at 1220 Lawrence. I'm going to see this thing out of my backyard. We're losing oak trees, which would have hit it, but we have an oak tree problem going on here in Lake Forest. They're dying. It's going to become more visible in Arbor Ridge as the oak trees die. So if there's lights added to that, it really will impact my property values. But I want them to review that. It's going to need lights. There are military helicopters that come over, and there's a military code for lights. I didn't read the whole thing. It gets too long for me to prep, but that should need to be reviewed. I think you need further study. You don't need yes or no tonight. There's a number of good suggestions you need to explore. Directional array, which will help the residents, may help the traffic. You need to get an independent consultant to look at this issue. I live 2,000 feet from the proposed site. The water tower at Waukegan and 60 is 2,000 feet. I get one bar in my car. It's not going to affect my cell service. My house has so much infrastructure, I have trouble in the house, but that's because of the infrastructure, not because of the service. I've lived there for 32 years. I ran a orthopedic trauma level 1 center for 20 of those years. There are workarounds. I did that as physician. You work around it if you want the ambiance of living in Lake Forest. Thank you.
Thank you. Rod Johnson, followed by Al Palmer.
Good evening. I'm not going to repeat a lot of things. Rod Johnson, we built our home in Arbor Ridge, 1990. We moved in, raised 2 daughters there. We're still there, love it. And we cannot support any change to this zoning in our area. I think the priority should be, and I'm not going to repeat all the reasons for this, but there's only one site in that area, 1.5 miles away, and the compost. I am dumbfounded why that wasn't number 1 priority, number 2 priority, number 3 priority to analyze. We've spent so much time wasted, in my opinion, on this particular site. Why? Environmentally, it doesn't make sense to have that so close to our community. So, on page 8, you have all these in red. Those recommendations for amendments. Absolutely, I crossed out everything except the compost center. If you need to have one ad, that's what should be added. Nobody can see it. It's Lake Forest property. Why isn't that number 1? It's 1.5 miles away. Let's focus on that and not waste our time upsetting an entire community. Thank you.
Thank you. Al Palmer, followed by David Huletta.
Good evening. I'm Al Palmer, 1077 Coventry. I will be in direct line of this microwave tower. Last week we were here, or last month, Debbie Cerniak was talking about frequency, and it really got me thinking frequency, okay? Because my cell phone works, and if you really have a problem, try Patriot Mobile. They'll switch you either or. It's a law. And but all these people with problems, we don't have a problem. Now, I do have this thing out my window, and getting back to the frequency. There's a patent here, and I'd just like to read it, just really tiny here, just to give maybe a different alternative here, because we're not finding out who these third-party vendors are, or we're kind of told they're cell phone companies, but that could be anything, right? Could be anything. So this was a patent application that was approved August 21 with very first patent that shows up in a list of 18,000 patents for the purpose of remote contact tracing of all vaxxed humans worldwide who will now be connected to the Internet of Things by a quantum link of pulsating microwave frequencies of 2.4 gig and higher from cell towers and satellites directly to the graphene oxide that's in the fatty tissues. So they're, you know, who's to say that a third party isn't Chinese CCP, okay, who's making big inroads in this country, that they want to be linked up there and they want to just monitor, well, they just push their way in here. And I express the same kind of concern with the Lake Forest here. I've been here since '86, and you know, I wish you guys would consider just halting it, okay? And it doesn't have to be for health reasons, okay, with something that you quote that's 25 years old or more. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. David Huletta, followed by Tyler Lisenby.
Hi, David Huletta, 740 Jennifer Court. I didn't prepare a speech, but I just want to share something on more of a personal level. I got off of work tonight around 5 o'clock, and when I got home, my wife said, "Hey, get ready, we're leaving in 10 minutes." So shortly thereafter, my in-laws, they're 80 years old, they drove all the way from the south side of Chicago to come watch our 3 kids. I thought we were going out to dinner. Today's my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Instead, I'm here. My wife wants to move. We have 3 small kids. We don't want this thing near our house. I think it's an eyesore. If you want to put a flagpole, put a nice American flag on it and put up a flagpole. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Tyler Lisenby.
Thank you. Oh, no one's after me? This is it?
This looks like the last one in my hand. Yeah.
Lucky me.
Close strong.
Yes, I'll try. Thank you. Well, first off, Tyler Lisenby, 1565 North Sheridan Road. I'd like to thank Kathy, as always, for an expert presentation. We're very lucky as a city to have her supporting us, and I'd like to thank the board for all your hard work, and thank you for doing what you do. There were 2 reasons that I wasn't going to speak tonight. First, my wife asked me not to. She is not here, so...
She's watching on TV.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Golden Bachelor's on, so, or Bachelorette, so she's not watching this. And I also live in Ward 1, right? So I have no dog in this fight. I live, my backyard's the cemetery, so talk about a dead zone. But seriously, with that said, I am surprised with Vertical Bridge's participation in the public comments they made here today, which convinced me to say something. I'm confused as to why they are not the petitioner in this request, right? To me, that's an interesting direction we're taking and an interesting order of operations to get to this point. Lake Forest has consistently, time and time again, found a better way to do pretty much everything, right? Whether it's budget, pension reform, I think we can find a better way. We do have a need. We know that, and we would all agree we want strong cellular service, but I would encourage the board to consider alternative options that meets the needs of not only all of Lake Forest, but particularly Ward 3 and 4 that are most affected. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so everybody has been given an opportunity to speak. With that, I will then officially close the public testimony portion of this meeting. And should we take a 5-minute break? Okay, yes, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back at 9:05. Meeting adjourned, or postponed. All right. Okay, we got through all the public testimony. We'll continue. All right, I'm calling this meeting back in order. Okay, at this time, I'll turn to commissioners to direct questions, any questions they have to staff following public testimony. All right, Commissioner Thomas, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure, thank you. Kathy, a question for you. In the course of evaluating this, I'm trying to get a sense of the level of expertise in cell phone technology that exists within the staff. Could you characterize that for me?
Staff, we are not experts in cell phone technology. When we originally wrote the code and identified the areas we did involve consultants, we certainly keep up with the literature, but no, we are not experts in cell phone technology. Okay. That's not the role of staff or of the commission.
Okay, that's what I would have assumed, but I just wanted to make sure. So in the course of putting this proposal together, specifically, I mean, who, other than city staff, who else have you consulted in preparing this?
This proposal really is the result of about 3 years of conversation, input, exploration of other sites. We've heard from a number of telecommunication companies. We've heard from a number of tower providers. There's been discussions about improving cell service in this area, in the Waukegan Road Business District, for some time. You heard that there was, once upon a time, a proposal to locate a tower at Private Bank. That was never pursued, but even several years ago, there was an acknowledgement that this area is not adequately covered. So it's really based on input that we've received from businesses, from telecommunication providers, from residents, from schools in the area, and from our public safety.
In the course of that, has the city ever hired external consulting support that could bring the kind of expertise that you don't have on staff?
When the original ordinance was written, we did that.
When was that?
97, the original ordinance was written. It was amended in 98, 99, and 2018, I believe. There was, when we discussed the demolition of Old Main, there were a number of carriers on the top of Old Main, and another tower was needed. So there was an advisory committee put together at that time, and some amendments to the code occurred at that time.
Okay, so it's been a number of years before there's been any kind of external expertise brought in. Is that right?
When we get individual petitions, we often bring in external consultants to review those. For instance, when providers want to change out, upgrade antennas on the water tower, we bring in consultants to evaluate that. So we don't issue a permit until that evaluation is done.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, that's all my questions. I assume discussion comes later, right?
We're going to do questions now, and then we'll get to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Neri?
Yeah, a few questions just based off testimony too from what people had said, like just talking about the water tower with the antennas and all that. How often are they upgraded? Is there like a law that says every 10 years there has to be new antennas? I mean, just out of curiosity on that.
I'm not aware of any law, but we certainly do much more often than every 10 years. We hear from those companies and get requests to upgrade, change out, move around antennas. So it happens fairly regularly, not just at the water tower, but at all sites. And as I mentioned earlier, we know there are ongoing discussions about locating additional antennas in various areas that are already approved. So that discussion really is ongoing.
Okay. Another question that I had is that, say hypothetically, nothing was done to change, no amendments, and a cell phone provider came and said, yes, I want to put up a tower in Lake Forest and what have you, would the city still have control of where, hey, this is the area that we have? Or does it literally have to be on the amendment to be able to control that? That's what I want to know.
The city has more control being proactive.
Okay.
Because the providers that we have heard from have indicated they'd rather not go through this process.
Gotcha.
And the city has had success in other areas of identifying these are permitted areas. If you want to fight the community on it, you can come in with somewhere else. But certainly, if a petition is filed to amend the code, you know, for a location here or anywhere else in the community, it would go through a process, but our timeline would be regulated by the language in the code. We would need to process it within a certain required time, and we would need to very carefully, if a provider comes in for a certain location, a certain type of tower, a certain type of infrastructure, the city may have less opportunity to negotiate and say, well, not this, but how about this? So we'd have to, if you wanted to deny it, we would need to craft that denial very carefully.
Okay. Another question that I had is these other alternate sites that were mentioned, and I always keep mentioning the District A5, the one by the compost, is that something that, because it's Vertical Bridge, the gentleman spoke tonight at Vertical Bridge, is it like a set thing in their mind, like if they've come to you and they've talked with you that, no, it's got to be at the train station, or is it, you know what I'm saying? I'm kind of confused of, it just seems like, you know, from what I was getting from him, my impression was that he was thinking, oh, it should be at this train station, because he has this map where he did this map with the dot and all that, and I'm assuming that's why you picked that location that he picked that location. They are saying that that was feasible.
I can't speak for all providers. What I can tell you is different providers, different tower builders are interested in different locations.
Gotcha.
So providing some flexibility, whether it's in, you know, certainly the areas identified at the train station are larger than would be needed, but the idea is to give some flexibility so that one of the options that might be put out there by the city, approved by the city, would meet the needs of one or more providers.
Okay, and that's it for now. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Pecos?
Kathy, you'd mentioned that you had mentioned there's a site on Everett Road by the tollway, but it was discounted, and could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure, there is an irregular shaped piece of property owned by the city located at the very, let's see, what would it be? Southeast corner of the tollway and Everett Road. So it's right behind, is it Bowling Green or Farm? One of the residents suggested that location. So we did look at the site, but there are cell towers on the other side of the tollway. I believe it's in Lincolnshire, and you see them on the south side as you're headed west. And those are very close to that site. That site also has some grade change. And that site didn't meet what we're hearing, the needs of that target area at the intersection of Waukegan and Everett Road. So those three reasons are the reasons that site was discounted.
So proximity to other towers is an influencing factor?
Certainly, if a tower and antennas cover a certain area, the ideal is not to necessarily duplicate that.
Okay. And was any property on the West Campus High School site considered?
The site that we've identified on the compost property, the city-owned compost property, is immediately adjacent to District 115 property, and we've had some discussions. I believe you have a letter in your packet that could provide some openness. Again, whether you know, we would identify a larger area. The reason the area on the compost center site is so small is because, as you can see from that map, most of it is floodway, so it cannot be disturbed. But could we identify perhaps a larger area that would span both the city property and school district, that's certainly possible, but there seemed to be at least a willingness on the part of the district to have that discussion. But again, whether that location may help some areas, but whether that location fully satisfies the need that's been identified, really focused on Waukegan and Everett Road, I can't say. But as Commissioner Neering suggested, there could be language that requires a future petitioner, a tower builder or a company, to provide documentation that that particular location is not feasible and that co-location on any structures or any buildings within the business district is not possible before they could look at the third option. And certainly to do that kind of analysis of a petition, an application for permit that a provider would submit, we would engage a consultant, as we have done in the past, to really analyze those coverage maps and the need.
No further questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Moorhead?
Yeah, just a few questions. So on the East Lake Forest side, there's 4.5 cell tower sites for coverage there. And on where we're looking on the West Lake Forest side, we're just thinking about one site. And my question is, hypothetically, if this tower were to be built, would we have to find another site to accommodate the gap in coverage in the areas that aren't being served by this tower? So are we going to need more towers than just this one?
I can't tell you that for sure. Based on my conversations, a tower in the vicinity of Everett and Waukegan Road of sufficient height that could accommodate multiple providers, could do a good job of not only providing coverage for the business district, but improving coverage beyond that and improving coverage even in other parts of the community where the antennas located there are really being asked to serve a much greater area. If more towers were needed, if a shorter tower was desired by the commission or the city council, perhaps more towers would be needed. But any additional towers, and any addition would need to come before the Plan Commission and go through the same process.
But under the Telecommunications Act of 1996, we cannot prohibit cell service. So if there is a gap in coverage and a petitioner comes forward with a cell tower proposal, we would have to potentially accommodate that?
We would have to evaluate it. And the providers would need to be willing to invest. And as you get into the lower density areas, I think what we've seen is telecommunication companies would rather spend their money where they get more bang for their buck. But we could not prohibit the build out of infrastructure when there's documentation presented that it is needed to provide adequate coverage.
Okay. And switching subjects, on the issue of coverage versus capacity, so we put up a cell tower, this cell tower, it provides coverage, but will it provide suitable capacity for, 10 years ago we were emailing, texting, and making phone calls, now we're streaming videos and all that. Will it provide the capacity? Or will we have to then build out 5G or something like that to accommodate all that?
Again, I can't tell you what the future would be. I can tell you that when we hear from providers who are already on the water tower, what they're telling us is they need to change out their antennas or they need to add more antennas for quality and for capacity. So I think those upgrades are happening all the time.
Okay. And then, so going back to the overlay district where I was talking about before, the north end of the south portion of District A, where there's no current tower, could we make it a condition that whoever, if there's a petitioner, that the petitioner put a tower there first before they put a tower in West Lake Forest, So, because there is a big hole right there with no tower, I'm assuming limited service.
What we could do, again, going back to Commissioner Nearing's suggestion, is we could require, and I believe that you can read the code in a way that requires this already, that none of the existing identified permitted locations will provide the adequate service. I do not think we could say, before you build a tower here, you have to build it there. We can't mandate a company to build out any particular infrastructure. But we can say, prove to us that none of the existing sites are adequate. And again, the code already says that. Minimize towers, minimize visual impact. We can make that requirement, and as part of an application, we would have a private consultant, an independent consultant, review that material and do that evaluation for us.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Davey?
Thank you. So I guess just a couple of comments before some questions. One, appreciate everybody who came this evening and the comments and concerns. It's why we have a process, right? It's why we have the opportunity to come together to have these conversations. Kathy, appreciate you. I don't think people, and there's always, you know, if you're out there out front, you take the bullets from the community. It's just the way it is. So appreciate the work that the staff does. This is an amazing city. It's an amazing city because we have incredible staff. It's an amazing city because we have really great people who serve on boards and commissions and volunteer their time. And it's a great city because we have active residents who participate, and they all work together. So I just want to make sure that, because this is, you know, clearly an issue that's not just, you know, something to think about, you know, around the problem sets and the logic, but it's an emotional issue. You know, the other thing too, I think is important to recognize is that, you know, we can't personalize things, and I get it. When we're emotional, sometimes people get up and start to, like, you know, pound the dais and personalize things, and this isn't a personal process as much as it's about the reason that the city is bringing these things forward is so that we can engage in a conversation. And so, you know, hyperbole doesn't help to then foster a good dialogue and to make people feel comfortable to stand up and talk, right? I mean, we've all been on both sides of issues where we've been the minority or we've been the majority, and I just think those things are important to keep in mind. On the issue of the health, I just want to recover that again really quickly because I don't think there's a debate, and I appreciate it. I think it was Miss May who talked about libertarian ideas or liberty, and I am a big proponent of that. And so it's not a function of our personal beliefs or a function of unsettled debate and legislation or litigation, because there is a debate going on in the country right now. It's just really a question of, as a member of a board or a commission, you know, what we're saying here is public. What we're saying here is documented, and there's a history of things that are said that are documented that are turned into litigation. So it's important for folks that are sitting here, and there are people in this room that I know that have been part of that in the past, to be cognizant and mindful of the idea that, you know, if the laws are the laws, whether we want to change those laws or don't want to change those laws, they are the laws, and so we as a public body have to be conscientious of that. It doesn't mean it has an implication on how we think about things personally, but it does mean that we have, you know, an important stewardship responsibility for the city of Lake Forest in that context. And there was another comment made, and I think it was, I want to make sure I get this right because I want to speak to it in particular. Hold on for 1 second. There was a comment made by Ms. Tortolesi about the legal opinion, or at least alluding to this idea that because we're not reacting to a petition by somebody but are seeking to potentially amend the code, that the standards are different, and they are not different. And that's not what our lawyers have told us. And so again, that's a really subtle nuance, but it's important because, again, we want to be thoughtful about the community. So enough on my comments. Specifically, I think we can stipulate to this notion, or maybe I shouldn't use the word stipulate, but I think we've heard for years that there's a cell phone coverage problem. I think somebody here got up and I think they said it well, which is, you know, look, there's not just a cell phone coverage problem in West Lake Forest. You know, I live in East Lake Forest and I can't work at home. And I think a lot of us could talk to that. So I think there's an issue across the board. I think it's going to get worse. I think we're all going to use bandwidth more and more and more. That's a reality. So I think we're all cognizant of that as we think about this, having this conversation, what we do. I think there's a good goal here, which is the goal is to limit the ability, limit too many towers, right? So we want to, if we're using tower technology, we want to limit the towers, right? I think the goal here is to control for aesthetics. Again, I mean, we wouldn't be volunteering on boards and commissions in Lake Forest if we didn't love living in Lake Forest. So I think that's, we're conscientious of that. I think we do want to control deliberation and we want to control timing, right? I mean, I think part of the idea here is just to get out in front of things. So I think those are important things to recognize in this discussion debate. Let me ask you a couple of questions, Kathy, before we end up in discussion, or Commissioner Pasquesi has, I was about to say Pickus, but Pasquesi has makes his comments or asks his questions. But so first of all, there's a recommendation around these different areas. So is there a market interest specifically in the water tower? Because coming into this, we've been talking about this as being proactive, recognize that someone spoke here on behalf of a cell tower, developer. So my question is what are the conversations around that water tower right now? What's been active in that process?
Yes, there is interest in either adding to the tower, which presents a problem of compromising the tower further, or a separate tower on that site. So yes, there is interest. There are active discussions, and it was suggested by some residents, and both of those came together, and that's why we're proposing that as part of the amendment.
Okay. And so there's both, we still have to do more, and are you saying we still have to do more analysis at this point, specific to the structural integrity of the tower? The structural integrity of the water tower?
The water tower is at capacity.
It is.
I've heard that very clearly from our water plant manager. I've heard that from our director of public works. We've heard that in the past as structural engineers have reviewed the tower. So the city cannot compromise that critical piece of infrastructure.
So it's not that there's no market interest. It's not that we could not serve market interest with the water tower. We would serve market interest by building a new tower, but we could build it in that location.
Correct. There are two providers currently on the tower. There is a third provider who's interested in that site and is open to the concept of a tower. Keep in mind that even if the code is amended and one or more locations are added, there is still a due diligence process that's needed. Engineering review, utilities, wetlands, access, independent review of need, demonstration that no existing infrastructure would be satisfied. So just because a site is identified doesn't mean providers will be interested, and doesn't mean it would be feasible.
Okay. And do we know at this point, when we talk about, and folks have brought this up, but we talk about kind of the existing technology versus doing upgrades to technology, and we say, okay, there's two providers on the water tower currently. Do we know what stage their technology is? Is it due for upgrade? Would they be interested in investing in this new tower with this third provider? Does that make the math work for the developer? I'm just trying to get my arms around the variables.
I can't answer all those questions. What I can tell you is that, yes, though some of the antennas on the tower have recently been upgraded. And we see that regularly, that they come in, they make upgrades.
Okay. I may have more questions, but I'm going to stop for a minute.
Thank you. I just had one quick follow-up to Commissioner Davies' question. With regards to, Kathy, what you were saying about the independent evaluation, when that would be done on any specific site, at what point in the process does that occur? So assume we approve any location tonight, it just goes back to City Council for final approval, correct? That's
correct. And these are just, you're not approving a tower, you're approving amendments to the code which would identify potential locations.
At that level, is that when these analysis of specific locations would occur prior to any final action on behalf of city council, or is it later in the process when an actual petition for a specific site is
It is later in
received?
the process, and
Okay.
the code currently identifies a number of requirements that any application for permit would need to meet. And I don't want to repeat them all, but we've talked about those. Demonstration of need, identification of coverage area, documentation that existing infrastructure or nearby buildings cannot serve as a co-location point, structural analysis, engineering, wetlands, access, adequate parking, adequate screening, all of that would happen at the time of application for permit, when we would expect and require a very extensive submittal from any petitioner. And I would add one more thing. That would also require documentation that a tower or antenna is not being built speculatively, that there are committed telecommunication providers who will locate on that infrastructure.
Okay. Any further questions for staff at this point, and then we can just kind of roll into discussion? Any? The public testimony has been closed, so no. Are we?
I got.
Yeah.
These are sites in west, and we've been talking about east and west, and they're, you know, we're having problems in both areas. Is it something to look at that maybe we need to look at some, if there's, is there other sites that, is this gonna come back again? That's what I'm asking in terms of, does this come back again? Like, hey, add more amendments for, you know, change the amendment for like the east side, like all of a sudden it'll be the east side of Lake Forest, or how is that gonna work?
Had any requests for additional locations in the other three quadrants. We have had requests, we are currently hearing requests for providers who are not at particular locations, where there may be one or two providers, to co-locate there. But those are already in the approved overlay district, so we are not hearing, might that change? Certainly. I can't tell you what the future may bring.
Thank you.
But can I just jump in on that point? So we're not hearing requests from providers, but we know we have coverage issues that should be addressed somehow.
We're not hearing requests from providers for new locations. We are seeing providers come in with upgrades to their antennas and to build out, to add additional providers to already approved locations where there may be only one or two providers. So there's definitely interest, there's activity on the part of the providers to improve and upgrade service in Lake Forest.
Okay, but what I'm searching for and not finding is a plan to address shortfalls in cell phone coverage outside of this area we're talking about tonight. Is that a gap, or am I missing something?
There are certainly options for providers. The distributed antenna system is a way that once there's the adequate larger infrastructure, some parts of East Lake Forest, in fact, I think we got a petition in just last week for a distributed antenna system in an area of the east side. So there are opportunities to build out those systems. We cannot require telecommunication companies to make investments in our community. We can make it simple, we can encourage them, we can reach out to them, but we don't have the ability to mandate improvements in any specific area.
Yeah, certainly understand that, but I just want to press on this one more time, and I promise I'll stop. What we're doing here tonight is considering a change in code to make it attractive for providers to make investments in Lake Forest, correct?
To streamline the process, yes. To improve, to encourage providers to invest in our community and
Okay, please,
streamline the
no
process.
comments from the public. Thank you.
So yes.
Yes, but we are not doing that for the rest of the city. There's opportunities, as you've described, but we are doing nothing proactive as a city to address the shortfalls outside of Southwest Lake Forest.
Yeah, I'd like to step in here and just say that this, you know, we're here to address this petition, and I think to go outside of the purview of this petition and try to address the greater Lake Forest cell phone issues is, I'd like to kind of stay on point and just address this petition on its face.
Yeah, I think if we do this piecemeal, there's a huge risk we don't optimize the system. And I honestly think we're making a mistake by looking at this one quadrant at a time, because we know we have problems that go beyond Southwest Lake Forest. And these whole series of facilities that we have, the 11 current ones, and we're talking about adding a 12th, it's all interrelated. But we're pretending by looking at this that that's not true. And I'm troubled by that. I think it's a mistake.
Understood. And then, no, we can just kind of roll into.
Moving into discussion.
Discussion, right.
Well, to piggyback on what Commissioner Thomas is saying, I kind of agree. There's two components to tonight. The bigger one is this particular proposal, but I do think that, I can say this briefly, that we're maybe looking at the trees and not the forest, and it would be helpful to have a more comprehensive, or it would be helpful to recommend to City Council that the city has a more comprehensive analysis of technology, particularly with 5G and DAS and all that, which I don't know, but I know that it's rolling out very quickly, and maybe there's other technology out there that we don't even know about as a commission. So I would say maybe we consider making that recommendation to City Council, but then we can address.
I think that's
Yeah,
a good point. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask another question.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, guys.
Nope. This one's for.
What's the, I mean, you know, who are the companies? I mean, I tend to want to blow things up sometimes. So, I mean, I'm pretty entrepreneurial. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. So for me, I want to understand who are the people that we hire as consultants, if we're hiring a consultant, to evaluate this issue, or to has the city worked with anyone in the past on this stuff?
We have hired consultants, and it really depends on the area of expertise. I can't name any specific, but we look at structural, we look at consultants that have technical expertise in telecommunications. And it would not be someone from a company, it would be an independent, I know we've hired someone before, but I can't remember. But yes, there are consultants that do all sorts of things. And
No
there
doubt.
are absolutely telecommunications consultants that would be independent. The city would hire them. That cost would be borne in evaluating any particular petition by the individual petitioner.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions before we roll into discussion? So, first I would like to say to everyone here tonight, and those that did not attend tonight but submitted correspondence, just kind of following up on what Commissioner Davies said. This is what makes Lake Forest great, is the input from the community. And as much as we would like to address every petition from maybe a personal standpoint, we can't. And as a commission, we are, in a place where we have to make decisions, not only for, based on all the input we hear from you all tonight, but for the entire community. And, but I will say, we heard from, I think, upwards of 30 of you tonight, and great insight and very helpful input, so I applaud all of you. With that said, what I kind of went through prior to this meeting was all of the correspondence we heard, and there clearly seemed to be, focusing on what we are tasked to do, which is evaluating this petition to consider an amendment to the code for a tower in the West Lake Forest train station. And the overwhelming responses that we received were basically broken down into three categories: health and safety, environmental, which we now are all aware of. We can't factor that into any decision we make. A lot of property value impact, negative impact on our property values. And the third was beauty and character of the community. All extremely valid points. But as we try to evaluate this petition on its face, we are precluded from considering that first objection. health, safety, and environmental impact. So, you know, remove that from the consideration. With regards to the other two main objections, I'll say that the impact on property values, while I don't debate that a cell tower certainly doesn't increase property values, I think in this, with regards to this specific location request adjacent to train tracks, I don't think a cell tower negatively impacts property value nearly as close or as much as proximity to a train track. So I would think that that offsets that objection. My biggest concern with this is the beauty and character piece. And it's tough. You know, we have 6 towers right now in Lake Forest. I assure you that every time one of those went up, there was this kind of opposition to it. Nobody wants it anywhere. But, you know, it's a needed part of our infrastructure, and all we're trying to do is identify the best locations for that. So with that said, I can say that, you know, all things considered with what we were tasked for, and keeping in mind that we are sending this back to City Council with a recommendation, I want to also make any action we do tonight have a condition based on what Commissioner Thomas and Moorhead said, with an evaluation or assessment of the overall cell tower plans for Lake Forest. But I also want to address the specific issue they tasked us with. And on that specific issue alone, I could support this petition under the conditions that we tasked the City Council with, also assessing greater overall cell tower service. Yeah.
I think it's important, I mean, that's why I had asked in terms of, you know, what about the east side and all that, but I do think it's important that, you know, this petition, I think you really need to do the A5, you need to have the tower there, put the tower there, and then you do co-locations on the businesses. These businesses have asked for cell and all that, they'll be more than willing to put it up on their roof or do something of that nature where it's not a pole or something. And see, it won't fix the problem, but it will help the problem. As we had just said, the whole city is, you know, I have terrible service and I'm on the east side. I mean, I called AT&T and they're like, oh yeah, you're in the dead zone, congratulations. I'm like, woo, you know, so it doesn't matter, but it will help. And I think, I'm concerned because at the station, I mean, the flagpole, it's huge and it's an eyesore. I mean, you're talking maximum feet of those buildings is 34 feet. And yes, you have other structures like the architectural structures that might make it 50 feet, but it's not 150 feet. So, I mean, I am concerned with that. I'd rather, you know, we've gone slow so far, so let's start with doing it at A5 and investigate that area and go through it. And because I am concerned, that's why I brought up that, you know, if you all decide like, hey, the 3 of those locations should be listed on there, I think it's important. It says, well, you need to show us why is this site not good? Why is this not comparable? Why can't, you know, because I think it's a balance in Lake Forest. I love this community. I mean, I love it. And I totally understand as a homeowner, you're like, oh, okay, you got that nice flagpole there. You know, you don't want that right in the middle in terms of the train station. And I would be really concerned on that if I was a homeowner over there as well. So I would just think that, you know, let's start with the one spot and say, hey, can we do this, and then do co-locations. As Kathy had said, over on the east side, they're adding more things to the co-location, so that might help the east side. It would just be nice to have information like that to know. So that's my concern. That's me.
Anyone else?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, so I mean, I come down where you do, I think, Commissioner Pasquesi, in the sense that, you know, if we're not considering health and safety, I'm not swayed by the property value issue, because there's actually, I think there's a lot of data on this, because people have debated this in city halls all over America. So, and it's, again, emotional versus objective, but and people are gonna have a point of view. You know, to me, you know, like the beautification issue is a big one. Whether this tower is the right answer or not, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But I do know, and there's a question about process, and look, process here is the city and you've said it, but the city council, you know, makes these decisions. We don't make these decisions. We're asked to make recommendations to the city council, you know, on an amendment change here. We can also, though, put conditions on our recommendation, and ultimately they can either decide to agree to our recommendations or they can throw everything out that we've said. Well, no, I didn't say it was, but I'm just offering, you know, that there's a process, and we can be deliberative like we are here, I think, to say, okay, there are things we would like to see. And I guess the issue for me is what's the language that we use, right? What's the language that we use? Because ultimately, even if we approved if we recommended a change to the zoning, the city council approved a change to the zoning, then there are these words here that say, you know, this is everything going forward after that is still subject to all the applicable limitations, requirements currently in the zoning code sections, et cetera, and all of the different things that you just referenced, Kathy, around the studies and the work that has to be done to approve an actual development or construction of an implement, right? So my question becomes, you know, what's our language if we're going to go down this road of having this vote, especially if we want to incorporate something more broadly about a condition around addressing these bigger issues, you know, Paul, that you're, Commissioner Thomas, that you're referencing, and that some people have asked us about. So, but I think I'd be inclined to deal with the issue in front of us and provide a bunch of conditions that safeguard the community and force, you know, or at least suggest to force some sort of deliberation around the broader issue and be a little more entrepreneurial about it. So.
Could I just ask a question? I'd like to make sure I understand your comments. You referenced that you weren't sure whether the tower was the right answer. But if we approve this code change, we are laying the groundwork for that tower to be built. So I don't understand how those two things go together.
I mean, I think, well, you could say we're laying the groundwork, or you could say that we're, you know, continuing a discussion and a process. I mean, breathing the air today that I have laid the groundwork for me to be here today. So, I mean, I don't know that I agree with that we're laying the groundwork for it as much as I'm agreeing with the idea that we are dealing with a specific amendment to a zoning code as opposed to approving a tower. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Commissioner Pickus?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that if we approve this tonight, then we approve a tower. It's pretty clear. So, you know, I think what's in front of us is are we going to approve this location, or are we going to recommend a different one? I can't get my head around a 150-foot tower at the train station. Just can't do it. So please. And I think I'm with Commissioner Nearing that I think A5 is probably the most logical alternative. I don't know if it solves the problem.
Right.
Like she said, I think it helps the problem, but it may not solve the problem. But I think it could set us up for what is coming down the road. We talk about additional technologies that are being developed and distributed antenna systems, et cetera. So I think this is probably the best we're going to get for this particular location. And that's what we're here to talk about. Broader scale, yeah, I think there should be a recommendation to go back to the city council to say we need to look at it holistically, and that should be done. But for tonight, for what we're talking about today, I can't support a site at the train station, and I would support further investigation into looking at site A5.
Very good. Okay. Commissioner Moorhead?
Yeah, just quickly, my short answer is I agree with Commissioner Pickus and Commissioner Nearing. In the last meeting, my criteria was the most suitable coverage with the least intrusive manner. And in that meeting, I had not seen the site coverage maps, which show that the coverage is not fully suitable, which I was under the impression that all of Westlake Forest in this area would be covered. And on the least intrusive manner side, I was also under the impression that there were many advantages to locating it on city-owned land, but in looking at the wireless overlay looking at the existing wireless infrastructure in the packet, realize it at I think it's 8 of 11 are on private land. 73% of the towers are on private land, ballpark. So I would encourage the city to consider other locations in Westlake, consider a couple things. Other locations in Westlake Forest, including private land. There's a golf course. I believe there's a 10-acre parcel in the southeast corner of Everett and Waukegan. It's, there's St. Mary's School. There's the recycling center. There's land to consider. And then it's late and I'm losing my thought. I guess I'll leave it at that. I would have them consider others, consider other land, private land, and consider whether whatever proposal we're doing is going to provide suitable coverage, because under this plan with this single tower, it looks like there's gaps. So in terms of making a recommendation to City Council, I would say let's go with the, the compost or recycling center as a location, A5, and then with more analysis, we can enhance that.
Commissioner Naring, Commissioner Thomas, any more discussion?
Yeah, if I could offer a couple of comments. I agree with most of the conversation in the last 5 minutes. I don't support, I can't get the yes on the proposal as it's come to us. I think the tower in the train station is very problematic, and I don't support that. If I had to pick a location for a tower, I would agree the compost site is the best place to put it. I think maybe where I'm a little different is I'm still not convinced we've pushed on this hard enough at all. I think Kathy and her team have done a heroic job getting this to where it is. This is an incredibly complex issue, and I think you all have done a great job pulling this together and getting it to where it's at. But it's gotten to this point with city staff that does not have deep expertise in cell phone technology. They've gotten here with experience they've had over the years and talking to vendors. And I think that gives you a view of the world, but I'm not sure it gives you the complete view of the world. And I'd like to bring more expertise in to challenge this whole notion of towers, and if there's not some alternative that we could do something better. Because even at the compost site, we're gonna build an ugly tower. And if there's a better way to do it, I think we ought to challenge ourselves to find it. And I'm not sure that process has been exhausted yet. I think it should be.
I definitely agree with you, but I do think it's important that we come out with one site, just because we know that there's interest in the vertical bridge people. He came and spoke tonight. So that way, at least, we are covering the city in terms of that they don't say, well, we're gonna go to the train station. Because I totally disagree putting it at a train station.
What's the benefit of going, I mean, I'm obviously asking questions on both sides of the issue because this is like, I want to have this discussion debate, but what's the benefit of approving the, that site if we wake up and the reality is it doesn't solve the problem? I mean, then we're just splitting the baby and saying, oh, well, we made some people feel good and we didn't solve a problem. So I'm just trying to get at that. I want to understand what we think the benefit is.
Mean that if you put it where the train station is, it's gonna solve the problem. Because as Commissioner Moorhead just said, he said, well, look at this doesn't even solve the problem here. So it doesn't matter. The whole Lake Forest has an issue.
Yeah.
But maybe this can help part of the issue, so then it's not pulling on this one, and then this one can actually go to the people that really need it more. And
Yeah, and again, I just to be clear, again, I said it before, I'm saying it again, I'm not saying that I'm in support of
No,
putting
I'm just saying that was my mindset.
A 160-foot tower by the train station. I'm just trying to address what was asked of us in the sense that what was asked of us was very much, it was specific to an amendment to the code, and it has, I don't know how many line items there are in this in all these different overlay districts here, right? So again, it gets back to our, approving something associated with amending the code, and then there's so many more steps to the process. By the way, I'm not, again, trying to come down either way on this. I'm just trying to have a discussion.
No, but that was my
And
mindset in terms of.
Well, yeah, and I'm trying to come up with, where do I want to be on that then? And I'm struggling with that, like as the solution is, hey, we're going to approve something that's feels like a half measure to me.
But
I'd almost rather say, well, I'm not approving anything because I'd rather solve the bigger problem
But
right,
rem-
to Commissioner
but-
Thomas's point.
But remember what Kathy had said. She said, well, it doesn't mean, yes, you've given a location, but then they've got to investigate it and make sure that it works and all that. And
Right.
if it doesn't work, then we're back again, and then maybe that does give more time to investigate the other part that we'd recommend, like, hey, let's look at this all at the infrastructure. It controls it a little bit more,
No, and they've expressed interest in that site.
and
So,
they've expressed interest.
you know, it's not like we just pick something out of the air.
No,
so,
they expressed interest.
yeah.
Kathy, can you refresh, I think, like Commissioner Moorhead, I have late-night fog brain. The interest in the compost center location versus the West Lake Forest train station, the pros and cons and the reasons why West Lake Forest train station was chosen over the compost center.
There are three providers that we know of, the three main providers, AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, who have all expressed an interest, a need, a willingness to invest in a tower site in the vicinity of the Waukegan and Everett Road intersection. At the water tower, T-Mobile and AT&T are already on the water tower. In addition to expressing an interest at Everett and Waukegan, Verizon has also expressed an interest in the opportunity to locate somewhere on the city's compost site. So it isn't an either or. AT&T and T-Mobile are already on the water tower.
Yeah, I mean, what I just struggle with is kind of, just looking at a map, objectively, there's an obvious area where there's no cell
yeah.
towers, whatever. It's kind of right down here. But if we go further north, yeah, it might improve a little, but it's still, I think there's a reason they chose Waukegan and Everett as the center point of whatever cell coverage there is. And I'm open, like, to me, if there was an alternative location, my alternative location is the fire department parking lot on the south side of Everett, but that's too close to homes. That's in that same general area, but, to move it anywhere outside of that immediate vicinity, I think fails. What did we say, a quarter mile, half mile? I don't know how much, how far the compost center is exactly from that location, so.
Well, it looks
that's-
like it's at the old, you used to call it West Campus,
Yeah.
Lake Forest High School.
Just north of that, right.
With the fields, right by the fields. So it is up more from, but again, it's not gonna solve the problem, I know
There's a
that.
cell tower over here. so
And
you
that's
can't
why
locate
the
one here 'cause it's
businesses
too
that are
close.
interested,
That's what I think.
let's get them involved, because there were a lot, and put antennas on there. I mean,
So with all that, anyone have any ideas on a motion?
Well, again, I think we gotta vote on the petition, right? So either we vote on the petition, or we decide not to vote on the petition. I mean, we can do that as well.
Can I make 3 more comments?
Absolutely.
Sorry. Can I make 15 more? No. Just 3 things briefly. I would encourage the city to consider having a maximum height of tower, not considering like the water tower, which is already there, but independent cell towers, having a maximum height. If you look at the tower at Woodlands, if you look at it really from any direction, but say you're standing in South Park looking at it, it's just above the trees, and that's 110 feet. If you added another 40 feet to 150, 160 feet, it would dominate the skyline. And so I would consider just a citywide height restriction on cell towers. Maybe that requires more cell towers, but that would be in keeping with the aesthetic of the city. I would encourage the city to, maybe city staff, to also look at other municipalities and what they've done, or how they've handled these issues. We're not the first one to handle this. And I just did a quick Google today. Ideas, Rye, New York, North Potomac, Maryland, Westlake, Texas have all had these issues, and are all approaching it with different strategies. So something to consider, just to look and see what other towns are doing. And then finally, in my humble opinion, in the next few years, 5 years, 10 years, the issue with cell coverage is going to be the question of, is there coverage and is there capacity? Because we're moving into Siri's listening to me. We're using more data than ever, and it's only going to increase. So we might have a cell tower with cell coverage, but the question is, are the cell phones functioning with the capacity? And so that would be I don't know the answer, but that would be an analysis we should consider as we're rolling forward with all this cell technology. That's it.
All right. Any further comments? All right, so do we have any action to propose? I mean, right, basically, the city council has tasked us with, evaluating this petition to amend this code, and we can either do nothing and send it back to them, right, Kathy? That's one option.
Correct.
The other is to recommend an amendment or amendments for one or more permitted locations with as many conditions as we'd like. With those two options, how do we feel about that? Yep.
Is there a third option where we say, we're not ready to make a decision on this until more work is done?
Yeah, I guess so, but I honestly, this is the second meeting, and I think with everything city council, tasked us with this. We've had 2 full meetings with it. I'm inclined to go back to city council with nothing and let them decide how to move forward, as opposed to continue it here. I think we've heard from everybody. I can't imagine there's anybody more that needs to speak on this. There certainly is more information to gather. City council can task us with that later. But right now, I think we go back and say, throw our hands up, city council say, sorry, we couldn't do anything, or go back with some sort of amendment or amendments that they can then assess and either reject or approve.
I'm going to make a motion that we reject this proposal.
Do I have a second?
Yeah. If we were to, so I would reject this proposal, but so I agree.
You
with
would
that.
need a second before you discuss
Yeah, no,
the motion.
we held off on the second, so there's no motion on the table right now. Yep.
Can we craft an alternative to this proposal, though, that gets back to the compost site and amend the code to allow a tower at the compost site?
At the
Is that
A5.
not an option in front of us?
We can make a recommendation on a specific site, correct, Kathy? And it could be, if we
Yes.
get the votes, it could be the compost site. If there's enough support for that, that certainly can be a proposal.
Okay.
I would be comfortable doing that.
Okay. So
I'm
you
sorry,
want
I
to
didn't
make a
hear.
motion with any conditions on top of that?
Conditions.
Or, I mean,
what I said was I would be comfortable making a motion to recommend the A5 site.
Okay.
Right.
For city council consideration.
To be added to the amendments and nothing. And then these criterias underneath, that external antenna arrays are prohibited, locate maximum distance from surrounding house, and all these red requirements under there.
Yes, okay, yeah. Sorry, I want to make sure we're on the right page. And then the city council can accept it or reject it or modify it.
Right, exactly.
As stated, I don't think that solves the problem, so I'm not sure it's worthwhile.
But there is interest, so.
There's
so
interest,
we
there's
can,
there's interest, but
if there's a motion on the table and there's a second, we can vote on it and see if there's.
Second,
Okay, so what's the proposal on the table?
it was,
The motion?
I thought.
A5?
I thought it was adding A5.
Would,
to
only
the
A5,
amend-
correct?
Only
Not adding.
A5, only
Right,
A5.
okay.
With these pieces of external, the red part, that's the bullets. External antenna arrays are prohibited, locate to maximize distance from surrounding homes to the extent possible. Tower must be constructed to accommodate at least, I wrote over that word, I can't read it. Providers, no more than one cell phone tower. Monopole is permitted. Ground equipment at this location must be screened with masonry wall and not to exceed 6 feet in height. Oops.
And those conditions were actually targeted to the train station, so I would just ask you to think through, if you are gonna do something at the compost center, do you allow the external arrays, since that's what you already have? on the water tower, it's more efficient.
Good point. I didn't think about that one.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's, you know, if we're going to do anything here, I feel like we should go back to city council with something. And it could be a no action. I would think we wouldn't have done our job, but I understand that. I think it's clear to me that the Westlake Forest train station is the most logical location for this monopole for me. I mean, today I drove around and literally went to look at the other 6 towers. I've lived here for almost 20 years, never noticed them before, had to like drive around and seek them out. You know, I get it, nobody wants it in, you know, the thought of it scares people, but I think it's just part of, you know, expanding infrastructure, and it's gotta go somewhere. And this meets all the criteria, in my opinion, for that kind of cell tower.
So I'm confused where we're at. Are we doing the motion on what
might-
we
we don't-
just
we don't want a
did?
motion for
And
that.
she was just,
I'm just saying,
Kathy
that-
was just saying, do you want external, or can we do the external?
It's
That's
just that
what I thought
Commissioner
we
Moore
were
had
talking
asked
about.
if, my opinion.
Not clear to
was-
me
yeah.
that there's
Yeah.
a
He's
We're
proposing
still in
something entirely
discussion.
different.
It's not clear to me that there's a motion on the
No.
table. You
There's
may,
not.
one possibility is you could take a motion and a vote on each of the 3 recommendations. On the compost center, on the train station with conditions, on the overlay district that would allow co-location on existing buildings. And then maybe you'd have a clearer distinction on where people are.
Works for me. All right, who wants to go ahead with the first motion? Kathy, can I make a motion? We'll just go and get through this.
Yes.
Okay, so I would motion to approve knowing the outcome, the Westlake Forest train station site as the location of, make the recommendation to City Hall as that location for the monopole with the conditions that were referenced in the city staff report. No second? All right, next.
A motion to add only A5 as a place in terms of to put a monopole there. Kathy, you had suggested maybe that they're outside or inside. I don't know what the difference is in terms of cost.
I would suggest that if, for the monopole site, that you don't put restrictions beyond what the current code already requires, which is demonstration of need. There's no other opportunity for co-location, all those other things we've talked about.
And that's for the A5 site, the compost site, right? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect, what she just said.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's do individual, Commissioner Moorhead.
I'm in favor.
Roll call vote, yep.
I'm in favor.
Okay,
The motion made by Commissioner Nearing, seconded by Commissioner Moorhead. Roll call vote, Commissioner Davy?
Approved.
Commissioner Moorhead?
Aye.
Acting Chairman Pasquesi?
nay.
Commissioner Higgis?
Nay.
Commissioner Nearing?
Aye.
Commissioner Thomas?
Aye.
4-2.
4. 4 ayes, 2 nays.
Yes.
It's hard to take a roll call and track that.
So being that we don't need to address the third option for motion, which was to do nothing, because we've done something. So we can send this back to city council.
The third recommendation was to approve an overlay district that would
Oh.
allow co-location on existing buildings with antennas. Again, just an opportunity to provide
Yes.
flexibility. May not work for anyone, but
That was,
since you took votes on the other 2, it may be appropriate to take a vote on that.
that was the motion that I was saying with the co-locations on, the businesses.
So this is co-location on buildings that already have antennas, is that the proposal?
Right,
Wait,
yeah.
Kathy, you want to clarify that?
No, the area suggested is that co-location on existing buildings in the Waukegan Road Business District. So on private, co-location
Like here.
means an antenna would be placed on an existing building.
See, like this, antenna,
Stop, please.
this, like this, like it's on the high school, it's on the,
I got confused by the co-location.
yeah. I mean, there could be more than one in the
So do we have a
front,
motion?
but it's like, you see how,
Anybody like to make a motion on that co-location proposals? Okay, hearing none, then I think that's everything. So we will go back to city council with the approval of the compost center as an option.
But weren't we gonna also add that they look at all of Lake Forest as well? Weren't we gonna put that in there as a recommendation sometime?
That will be reflected in the minutes as a recommendation, yes.
All right, so that closes out that item on the agenda. Opportunity for the public to address Plan Commission on any other matters not on the agenda. Okay, awesome. I had additional items from staff. Do we have anything?
Nothing further. We will see you in December for
Or Bank Lane?
an update on Bank Lane.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Second. All right. Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Oh.